Chapter 1525. When did I say anything else? Xiaohua, who was behind Shui, smiled and said while rubbing his nose, I only said that if your injuries haven't healed yet, you should rest for a while. Since you've already healed, you can naturally go forward together. Humph, Shui coldly snorted and continued to fly forward without stopping. This person, as Xiaohua spoke, he urged his magic power to follow closely behind Shui and entered the valley. Just after Xiaohua entered, a slightly immature voice came from the Thunder Boat. Fellow Taoists, this is the last test of our sect's disciple selection. All fellow Taoists must enter. If you don't enter within 15 minutes, you'll automatically give up the selection and be transported to the Thunderclap Peak. Ah! The remaining 100 cultivators were shocked when they heard this and immediately got up from the ground. They didn't dare to delay any longer and entered the valley one after another. After all the cultivators had entered, another ray of light similar to the one before shot out from the Thunder Boat. When that ray of light shone into the valley that everyone had entered, the entire valley began to shake. Soon after, there was a rumbling sound as if the mountains were shaking and the earth was shaking. Then the thunderboat suddenly slid and disappeared into the darkness of the night. As for Xiaohua, he followed behind Shui and entered the valley. However, the moment he entered, several different sceneries swayed before his eyes. Xiaohua only felt a blur before his eyes, and then he was standing on top of a mountain. Beside him were only lofty mountains and precipitous ridges. Where was Shui's trace? Ah? Illusion array? Xiaohua was shocked. He really didn't expect that after passing through the illusion array, there would actually be another illusion array in this thunder-seeking valley. What made Xiaohua even more uneasy was that when he released his perception and wanted to find out the truth behind the illusion like before, he shockingly discovered that what he saw with his perception was actually exactly the same as what he saw with his eyes. This Xiaohua thought for a moment, and knew that the ray of light shot out from the thunderboat just now was precisely to stimulate this illusion array. Moreover, this illusion array was the real illusion array of Thunder-Seeking Valley. It was definitely not something that a 10th level qi refining cultivator, like him, could see through. Xiaohua thought for a moment and shouted. Waves of echoes echoed from the valley below the mountain, but no one responded. I'm afraid this illusion array is divided into many parts. Shui and I didn't come in together, so we must have been assigned to different areas. Even if we came in together, I'm afraid we would be separated. Xiaohua comprehended something. Then he urged his transcendence energy and used the flight technique, flying high into the air. He raised his eyes to look at the vast expanse of lush greenery beneath his feet and said to himself, how do I break this illusion formation? Just as he was thinking, the entire world began to shake violently. Xiaohua's standing figure almost lost its balance. Before Xiaohua could fly up from the cliff, the mountain range under his feet began to rise with a rumbling sound. Looking around, there were also towering mountain ranges emerging from the ground with a rumbling sound. Around the mountain ranges, the previously lush forests had sunk into the ground as the mountain ranges rose. Streams of spring water gushed out, forming lakes. There were also some that were directly crushed into mud by the mountain peaks and disappeared. Xiaohua was stunned. Although he knew that this was an illusory array, he still couldn't help but be shocked by everything that was happening before his eyes. I also don't know. What realm must I cultivate to be able to have this kind of divine ability that can move mountains and overturn seas? While Xiaohua's eyes were burning with envy, he suddenly thought of the black dots, light, and the evolution of earth, fire, wind, and lightning that he saw while he was unconscious. His heart unconsciously rippled. This divine ability that can move mountains and overturn seas is already so terrifying. Then the evolution of earth, fire, wind, and lightning is probably a divine ability that can create the universe. Then just how majestic is it? Xiaohua's chest couldn't help but rise with a kind of heroic spirit. He opened his mouth and let out a long roar. The rumbling sound of the trembling actually couldn't suppress this long roar. Ha ha ha, this young master wants to see when this young master can reach the level of creation and move mountains and overturn seas. Just as Xiaohua's voice fell, there was a sharp sound. From below Xiaohua's body, the mountain range that had just risen abruptly split into two halves. Scorching hot magma gushed out from the mountain range and rushed straight towards Xiaohua's body. Come on! Xiaohua let out a loud shout as he circulated his magic power. His figure flickered as he used the fire escape technique. His feet landed on the magma, and his entire body moved along with the magma. At first glance, it looked as if he was stepping on fire. Fellow Taoists. Just as Xiaohua stood on top of the magma and very carefully walked forward, a voice sounded. Following this voice, the trembling of the entire world suddenly stopped. The magma under Xiaohua's feet also quickly cooled down and turned into crimson rocks. This is the illusory formation that my Imperial Thunder Sect's 12th layer Qi refinement disciples use to test their cultivation. It is also the third trial that all fellow Taoists must pass. The voice was like the sound of nature, resounding throughout the entire world. Currently, the 1,218 fellow Taoists who are participating in the selection are scattered within this illusory formation. There are absolutely no other cultivators within 10 li of each fellow Taoist. Because this time my sect wants to recruit 100 disciples, 1,118 fellow Taoists will be eliminated. From now on, no matter what method is used, as long as a fellow Taoist number plate is snatched away by someone else, that fellow Taoist will be eliminated. And the more number plates a fellow Taoist accumulates, the higher his ranking will be. At dawn, my sect will open the illusory formation and rank the fellow Taoists according to the number of number plates obtained. The first 100 fellow Taoists will become disciples of my Imperial Thunder Sect. After the voice finished speaking, the entire world became silent, without the slightest trace of movement. Xiaohua didn't dare to be careless. He promptly released his perception. Sure enough, he didn't see any traces of cultivators in his surroundings. This rule is actually quite interesting. Xiaohua narrowed his eyes and looked at the mountain peak that had just been erected in the distance. He thought. This young master thought that there would be some kind of arena at the end to compete for the top 100. Who would have thought that the final disciples would be selected within this illusory formation? Moreover, according to the ranking of the number plates obtained, 1,118 fellow Taoists will be eliminated. If one wants to enter the top 100, one must obtain at least 12 number plates. Then 12 fellow Taoists will be eliminated. It seems that there were quite a few middle-stage Qi condensation cultivators in the open space just now. This young master gathering 12 number plates should be quite easy, right? Xiaohua had a smile on his face and his figure flew up. He glanced around and then casually flew towards a direction. However, at this time, a splendid firework flew into the air not too close to Xiaohua's left. It didn't disperse for a long time. And soon after, another dozen or so similar things also flew up in succession, far and near. What's this for? Xiaohua was rather puzzled and inwardly said. Others can't hide in a hurry, but these people. Oh, I understand. Xiaohua suddenly came to a realization. These are those dozen or so 11th level Qi condensation cultivators. They're calling out to the fellow Taoists who agreed to meet up with us just now, right? But the number plates are limited. Do those cultivators dare to meet up? Xiaohua was puzzled again, and immediately shook his head. Why do I care so much? This young master is going to gather 12 number plates first. With this thought, Xiaohua increased his speed. Sure enough, just as he flew for a short moment, a 7th level Qi condensation cultivator barged into Xiaohua's perception. This cultivator wore a crimson Taoist robe, truly eye-catching. The red-robed cultivator seemed to be fleeing, turning his head to look back from time to time. By the time he discovered Xiaohua, he was already in front of Xiaohua. When the red-robed cultivator saw Xiaohua's 10th level Qi condensation cultivation, he almost cried out in alarm and hurriedly changed direction. Unfortunately, how could he fly faster than Xiaohua? Just as he changed direction, Xiaohua moved in front of him and laughed. Fellow Taoist, a crisp bang rang out. The red-robed cultivator simply didn't wait for Xiaohua to finish speaking. The sword talisman in his hand transformed into a foot-long flying sword, and directly pierced towards Xiaohua's chest. Xiaohua's brows slightly furrowed. Seeing the flying sword fly towards his chest with incomparable speed, he didn't have the slightest thought of dodging. He simply raised his right hand and slapped towards the flying sword. Huh. The red-robed cultivator was stunned. In his opinion, even if Xiaohua's cultivation was at the 10th level of qi condensation, he should have taken out a high-level yellow talisman to deal with this flying sword talisman. How could he possibly receive the flying sword talisman with his bare hands? 10th level of qi condensation. Sure enough, it's a high-level cultivation. On the other side, Xiaohua's expression was indifferent. He was still muttering in his heart. Only after cultivating to a certain level would I know what kind of disdain he had when he faced me, a 4th layer aura refining loose cultivator. Back then, when the Fu clan's talisman puppet faced me, I'm afraid it was also this easy. The gap between realms is really huge. Xiaohua sighed with emotion as he urged his magic power, and used the thunder palm in his hand. A half-foot-long lightning bolt flashed out of thin air, and struck the flying sword in midair. With a cracking sound, the flying sword was immediately shattered by the thunder palm, as if it was made of colored glass. Immediately, it turned into several pieces of paper and flew into the air. This high-level flying sword talisman, which in Xiaohua's eyes before, seemed to be very powerful. Now, with a casual wave of Xiaohua's hand, it vanished into thin air. The red-robed cultivator was even more terrified. He slapped his hand and took out another stack of fireball talismans, wanting to throw them out. Fellow Taoist, I only want your number plate. I don't want to take your life. If you continue to resist like this, don't blame I for being ruthless. Xiaohua's cold voice sounded in the cultivator's ear. Hearing this, the red-robed cultivator's face revealed a trace of relief. He softly said, "Is fellow Taoist's words true?" Believe it or not, I don't feel like explaining to you." Xiaohua stood in midair, and turned his head to look at where the cultivator came from. He said, "I have limited time, I will only count to 6. If fellow Taoist doesn't leave the number plate on the ground and leave, then I will yes. Seeing Xiaohua's anger, the red-robed cultivator didn't dare to be negligent. He slapped his hand and took out a number plate from his storage bag. He placed it on the ground and said, "I will leave the number plate here. I hope fellow Taoist will keep his word." Go Xiaohua indifferently looked at the number plate on the ground, and waved his hand. But just as Xiaohua was about to wave his hand, a hand suddenly reached out from the ground and grabbed the number plate in his hand. Chapter 1526. Fellow Taoist, when the red-robed cultivator saw that the command tablet on the ground had been snatched away, he immediately looked nervously at Xiaohua. But Xiaohua wasn't the slightest bit nervous. Seeing that hand and the command tablet disappear into the ground, he laughed and said, "Take care of yourself and go." Then the red-robed cultivator cupped his hands and said, At this moment, a strange thing happened. The red-robed cultivator's figure faintly flickered, like a candle swaying in the wind. After swaying twice, the red-robed cultivator disappeared from where he stood. What's going on? Xiaohua was somewhat dazed, but when his perception tracked down the cultivator who had just taken the command tablet, he somewhat understood. The Imperial Thunder Sect's disciple said he wanted to eliminate 11-18 cultivators. I'm afraid this is the method of elimination. Just now, when the command tablet was about 1 zhang away from the red-robed cultivator, the red-robed cultivator immediately disappeared. He should have been transported out of this illusion formation. In other words, he was eliminated. The command tablet can't be more than 1 zhang away from the body. Otherwise, it will be regarded as having been snatched away and automatically transported out of the illusion formation. Why didn't the Imperial Thunder Sect's disciple mention this kind of thing? Xiaohua was bewildered, but he immediately formed hand seals and his body drilled into the ground. He used the earth escape technique and chased in the direction the other cultivator escaped in. The other cultivator was a person with a pointy mouth and monkey-like cheeks. He was precisely chasing after the red-robed cultivator from just now. Xiaohua had long since discovered that. When the cultivator with a pointy mouth and monkey-like cheeks saw that Xiaohua's cultivation wasn't inferior to his, he immediately escaped into the ground, wanting to catch him off guard. He originally wanted to sneak attack Xiaohua, but when he saw the red-robed cultivator actually put the command tablet on the ground, he naturally didn't hesitate to take the command tablet away. According to this cultivator's thinking, he was at the 10th level of qi condensation, and Xiaohua was also at the 10th level of qi condensation. Not to mention whether or not Xiaohua had an Earth Escape talisman. Even if he did, he might not be able to catch up to him. Who would have thought that just as this 10th level cultivator fled for a moment, he heard Xiaohua's eerie voice from above his head. Fellow Taoist scheme. You actually dared to take the command tablet away from I didn't want to take your life. Humph, the monkey-faced cultivator suppressed his astonishment and let out a cold snort. He clapped his hands and took out several yellow talismans. However, just as he urged his magic power, an incomparably fierce force suddenly came from the space between his eyebrows. When he saw a black light instantly pierce through his Earth Escape talisman and the yellow talismans around him, he felt a pain between his eyebrows and immediately lost consciousness. What's going on? Xiaohua drove the black iron needle into the cultivator's forehead, but a strange scene appeared. Just as the black iron needle pierced into the cultivator's forehead, the cultivator's body began to flicker. Just like the red-robed cultivator, the cultivator's body gradually disappeared, leaving behind two identical number plates in front of Xiaohua's eyes. Oh, so that's the case. Xiaohua put the two number plates into his storage bag and nodded slightly. The Imperial Thunder Sect still has the intention of protecting the cultivators participating in the selection. Inside this illusion formation, even if you lose your life, you don't have to worry and will be immediately transported out. And that's fine too. In this case, this young master also doesn't have any misgivings. At this moment, Xiaohua was truly awe-inspiring. This was also the first time he could hold his head up high after hiding from the three sects of the state of Xi. His magic power was truly much higher than his peers. Dealing with the 6th and 10th level of qi refining was simply as easy as reaching out his hand. Moreover, the reason why qi refining cultivators became qi refining cultivators was precisely because they drew the spiritual energy of heaven and earth into their body and refined it for their own use. This was merely the lowest level of cultivation. They could only rely on their magic power to drive the yellow talismans. Speaking of which, they couldn't even be considered to have crossed the threshold. Only after reaching the 12th level of qi refining and beginning to possess divine sense could they begin to rely on their own magic power to cast spells. Only then could they be considered to have truly stepped into the threshold of cultivation. Although Xiaohua was currently only at the 10th level of qi refining, he was already able to cast spells. In these past 2 years, he had repeatedly read through the book of foundational spells he obtained from the Feng clan. He had long since practiced all the spells in the book to the point that he was thoroughly familiar with them. This Thunder Palm was actually the most powerful spell in the book. Today, he took it out very easily, making a profit. Immediately after, Xiaohua randomly picked a direction and flew away. One after another, he found 2 cultivators around the 8th level of qi refining. These 2 were tactful. Knowing that they couldn't contend against him, they obediently took out their number plates and withdrew from the illusion formation. This is good. It's as easy as blowing off dust. Using reason to convince people. Xiaohua somewhat enjoyed this feeling of being an expert. If nothing unexpected happens, this young master will soon be able to gather 12 number plates. However, this was often the case. The easier it felt, the easier it was for accidents to occur. In the time it took for an incense stick to burn, Xiaohua didn't find another cultivator, regardless of whether they were high or low level. It was as if these cultivators were all hiding. Strange. Xiaohua released all of his perception. He even looked underground, but he didn't have the slightest clue. Looking at the color of the sky, it was already extremely dark. Presumably, this was the darkness before dawn. Before long, the sun would rise from the east again. This is bad. Xiaohua's heart jumped. His figure flew up into the air. Looking at the signal that was the closest to him, he sneered. Damn it, it seems this young master wants to test his luck. At this moment, without waiting for Xiaohua to urge his magic power, a faint divine sense swept past him from behind. It passed by Xiaohua's body and immediately locked onto him. Soon after, in Xiaohua's perception, another dozen or so cultivators appeared behind him. They quickly surrounded him from all directions. Humph! Xiaohua coldly snorted. He waved his hand and took out the black iron needle from the space. He quietly sent it into the air. Soon after, he took the devil's spear and a large stack of fireball talismans in his hand. He pretended to be ignorant and flew forward. Fellow Taoist. Xiaohua flew for a moment, and sensed that the dozen or so cultivators had surrounded him. Then he heard a warm voice call out from behind him. Xiaohua turned around and frowned slightly. The two people who appeared behind him were none other than Ma Miaoming and Jiang Mingxiao. Ha ha! Ma Miaoming saw Xiaohua and laughed happily. Fellow Taoist Jiang, it's this guy. I saw a few people outside the illusory formation. They were all very willing to submit to fellow Taoist Jiang. Only this guy ignored you. Hee, everyone has their own ambitions. I have never forced anyone. Jiang Mingxiao smiled and waved her hand. What ambitions does he have? He's just a loose cultivator. Needless to say, he cultivated to this level by robbing cultivation techniques and spirit stones. Even if he wants to submit to fellow Taoist Jiang, we still have to carefully consider our own reputation. Ma Miaoming sneered. Fellow Taoist Ma, do you still remember that loose cultivator Chang Huan? How despicable and shameless. He treated fellow Taoist as his reborn parent. As soon as fellow Taoist left, he immediately. Fellow Taoist Ma. Jiang Mingxiao frowned with displeasure. I know my wrongs, I know my wrongs. Ma Miaoming immediately flattered. Fellow Taoist Jiang is a magnanimous person. You won't take this kind of trivial matter to heart, but I still feel indignant for fellow Taoist. Then, she looked at Xiaohua and said, how could ordinary loose cultivators surpass the 7th layer of the qi refining realm? If he didn't use despicable means, how could he reach the 10th layer of the qi refining realm? If fellow Taoist Jiang makes a move on one hand, we'll have another number plate. On the other hand, we can avenge the fellow Taoist who died in this guy's hands. I have my own ideas. Jiang Mingxiao waved her hand and stopped Ma Miaoming from speaking. She cupped her hands and said, I remember that fellow Taoist is called Xiaohua, right? Yes, that's right. It's extremely difficult for loose cultivators to cultivate. This is common knowledge in the cultivation world. Joining the Imperial Thunder Sect is fellow Taoist Zhao's best opportunity. This is already the last hurdle. Fellow Taoist Xiao only needs to obtain 12 number plates to fulfill his wish and become an official disciple of a major cultivation sect. In the future, he won't have to worry about spirit stones, medicinal pills, or cultivation techniques anymore. What do you mean, fellow Taoist Jiang? Xiaohua was a little puzzled. Nothing. I just admire the willpower of loose cultivators like you. In a situation where you don't have anything, you actually managed to cultivate to the 10th layer of the qi refining realm. If it's absolutely impossible. Therefore, I want to give fellow Taoist Xiao a chance. Oh, you still want I to follow fellow Taoist Jiang? Xiaohua looked at Jiang Mingxiao with a faint smile. Yes, I naturally trust others, but fellow Taoist Xiao is a loose cultivator. Therefore, I ask fellow Taoist Xiao to swear a blood oath that in the future, you'll only follow I in the Imperial Thunder Sect. If you do, I will spare your life and protect you. Who? Jiang Mingxiao was persuading Xiaohua when suddenly, another divine sense swept over. Jiang Mingxiao frowned and scolded towards the source of the divine sense. Of course it's I. An extremely arrogant voice came. Then, more than 10 cultivators flew down from the east side of Xiaohua. Wang family of Guangxian? Jiang Mingxiao sneered and said, fellow Taoist Qiming, can't you see that I am doing something here? Fellow Taoist Jiang, of course I can see you. Wang Qiming's face was sharp and thin, and he actually had a goatee under his chin. His eyes were slightly red, and he said with a sinister smile, the loose cultivators in this area have all been killed and those who should have fled. It's hard to find an extra number plate. It's not easy to find an unguarded one here. I also came to take a look on behalf of my subordinate brothers. Fellow Taoist Wang. Jiang Mingxiao scolded. This fellow Taoist has already pledged his allegiance to I and is I's brother. This number plate. I'm afraid I can't give it to you. Is that so? Wang Qiming rolled his red eyes and said with a smile. It seems this fellow Taoist hasn't agreed yet. He, fellow Taoist Wang. Do you think this fellow Taoist won't agree? Jiang Mingxiao looked up to the sky and laughed loudly. Xiaohua stood there and looked at the two people coldly. When he saw Jiang Mingxiao laughing, a faint smile also appeared on his face. He cupped his hands and said, "Fellow Taoist Jiang, I'll let you know that I won't agree to this condition of being someone's servant." Jiang Mingxiao was laughing halfway, but at this moment, it was as if someone had grabbed his throat and he couldn't laugh anymore. A vicious expression appeared on his face. He clapped his hands and took out an earthen yellow sword talisman. He urged his transcendence energy, and the sword talisman suddenly expanded, becoming a huge sword more than half a foot wide. Jiang Mingxiao waved his hand, and the surrounding spiritual energy of heaven and earth was absorbed by the huge sword. Then, just as Jiang Mingxiao was about to use his divine sense to urge the huge sword, Xiaohua's figure suddenly stood up and he sneered. "You want me to pledge my allegiance with this little ability? Go home and cultivate for another 100 years. Chapter 1527. After that, Xiaohua didn't give Jiang Mingxiao any chance to swing his greatsword. His entire body was like a gust of wind, and he instantly arrived in front of Jiang Mingxiao. Similarly, he waved his hand, and a dozen fireball talismans surrounded Jiang Mingxiao's body. Rumble! The fireball talismans were incomparably powerful. Not only did they blast Jiang Mingxiao to the point that he fled in a sorry state, they even disrupted the entire scene. Xiaohua originally used the devil's spear tip in his hand, but just as he took it out, he remembered that there were many cultivators here. Moreover, even if he stabbed Jiang Mingxiao to death, he would only be teleported out of the illusory formation. The secret of his devil spear tip couldn't be kept. Rather than that, he might as well not use it. Xiaohua could be considered to have hit the mark by a fluke. Jiang Mingxiao was a mid-stage 11th stage Qi refinement cultivator, and already had divine sense. If Xiaohua threw out the fireball talisman from afar, he absolutely couldn't get within one zhang of his body. Naturally, he wouldn't be able to succeed. At this time, even if Jiang Mingxiao had divine sense, the fireball talisman had already exploded within one qi of his body. He could only flee. Xiaohua saw that Jiang Mingxiao's defense had been blown to pieces by the fireball talisman. His hands moved again, but right at this moment, an earth spike suddenly flew out from under his body, and was about to pierce into the sole of his foot. Xiaohua's figure flew again, dodging the earth spike. He turned his head to look at Wang Qiming, who was not far from him and had a trace of astonishment in his eyes. Damn it, this guy should have gone to sneak attack Jiang Mingxiao. Why did he attack me? Xiaohua glanced at Wang Qiming. Although he was puzzled in his heart, he didn't pay much attention to him. Seeing that Wang Qiming had come to his senses and was forming another seal, wanting to attack him, Xiaohua immediately circulated his magic power. His figure flashed as he closely chased after Jiang Mingxiao. Moreover, the fireball talismans in his hand shot out one after another. Jiang Mingxiao, who was fleeing in a sorry state, was incomparably depressed. He really didn't expect Xiaohua to make the first move. Moreover, he absolutely didn't expect Xiaohua's speed to be so fast. The fireball talisman was of such a high level. For a moment, he lost the initiative and could only flee outside. He wanted to avoid the fireball talisman first, then use his divine sense to deal with Xiaohua. However, the fireball talismans were endless, causing Jiang Mingxiao to almost vomit blood. Just as he steeled his heart, several net of ice talismans in his hand, he was prepared to take the opportunity to use his divine sense to resist the fireball talisman, and take the opportunity to take his magic tool. When suddenly a swift and fierce aura from the sky, very sharply, the yellow talismans, the talisman's talisman, of course of a sudden, of S2s, a sharp sharp took the opportunity of S2 of his own tool, of course, of S's, Si2SSS, I of Estios, S's heads of his, S that of his of course, of hit, S's of his, he of his of, hims when he's he of, Xiaohua sensed the magic power of this of his magic power, and with a wave of his hand, a half-foot-long thunder palm shot out from his hand. It directly hit Wang Qiming's SS of his, and immediately broke the of his. At the same time, Jiang Mingxiao's figure disappeared. Crash! A series of sounds rang out, and unexpectedly, 14 number plates fell from midair. Xiaohua was overjoyed. With a wave of his hand, the 14 number plates were all caught by him, and very nimbly, he put them into his storage pouch. From the moment Xiaohua threw out the fireball talisman to the moment he used his black iron needle to kill Jiang Mingxiao, all of his movements were as quick as lightning, far exceeding the expectations of the crowd of cultivators. Therefore, no one expected these 14 number plates to be his. By the time they saw them clearly and their thoughts had just arisen, the number plates had already been put into Xiaohua's storage pouch by Xiaohua. Haha! The happiest of all was Wang Qiming. His entire thin face was flushed red. With a wave of his hand, he formed another seal, and his figure flew in the direction of Xiaohua, chasing after him. However, something Wang Qiming didn't expect happened. Xiaohua didn't flee. Instead, with a cold smile on his face, he actually rushed over just like him. This guy actually isn't afraid of death? Wang Qiming's brain couldn't quite wrap itself around it. The confinement technique in his hand was still unleashed. Crack! When Xiaohua casually used a palm of thunder to break the confinement technique, Wang Qiming suddenly thought, this is bad. Jiang Mingxiao's cultivation is at the middle stage of the 11th layer of the qi refining realm. Just like me, he was killed by this guy. Wouldn't I also be no match for him? But he's only at the 10th layer of the qi refining realm. Damn it, I actually still have to chase after him. Wang Qiming's brain reacted slowly, but his cultivation wasn't fake. When Wang Qiming came to his senses, his figure immediately rushed towards the sky, as if he wanted to change directions and avoid Xiaohua. What a pity! Although he was at the 11th layer of the qi refining realm, a layer higher than Xiaohua's realm, how could his flying talisman compare to Xiaohua's flying technique? Just as he flew into the air, Xiaohua's figure appeared behind him. Where do you think you're going? Xiaohua asked indifferently. Xiao. Fellow Daoist Xiao, please spare my life. Wang Qiming couldn't bear it anymore and shouted loudly. I was possessed just now. I shouldn't have attacked fellow Daoist. Since fellow Daoist has already killed Jiang Mingxiao and collected all the number plates, please take pity on I. This little one only has 11 number plates. If fellow Daoist Xiao can let I go, I will enter the Imperial Thunder Sect. These cultivators in my hands will all be under fellow Daoist Zhao's command. Ah? The dozen or so cultivators under Jiang Mingxiao and Wang Qiming's command were all around the 8th layer of the qi refining realm. Under the might of Xiaohua's dozens of fireball talismans, they had already hidden far away. They simply didn't have time to clearly see what was happening in the field. When the fireball talisman's raging flames disappeared, they saw a middle stage of the 11th layer of the qi refining realm being chased all over the sky by a late stage of the 10th layer of the qi refining realm. As he fled, he even begged for mercy. This situation. How could they not be shocked? Humph, this young master doesn't care. Xiaohua sneered. If you dare to reach out to this young master, then you should be prepared to be killed by this young master. As Xiaohua spoke, he also threw a large pile of fireball talismans at Wang Qiming's body. At this moment, Wang Qiming seemed to have come to his senses. This was an illusion formation, so there was no danger to his life. Seeing that Xiaohua didn't intend to let him go, he stopped and clapped his hands. A magic tool in the shape of a gourd was taken out by him. Urging his transcendence energy, a misty blue brilliance shot out from the gourd's mouth. From top to bottom, it gradually protected his entire body. The dozen or so fireballs exploded around the blue light, but they only shook the blue light back and forth. They couldn't harm Wang Qiming at all. Fellow Daoist Xiao Wang Qiming's face had a trace of satisfaction. Seeing that the blue light had already merged together under his feet, his heart relaxed, and he opened his mouth to speak with a smile. It was also at this moment that a jet-black brilliance appeared under his feet. With lightning speed, it pierced the place where the blue light had just converged. The blue light only resisted slightly before it was immediately pierced by the brilliance. With a pu sound, that brilliance pierced into the sole of Wang Qiming's feet. Ah! Wang Qiming was stunned. and he unconsciously lowered his head. Unfortunately, before he could understand what was going on, his entire body swayed, and he slowly disappeared from where he was standing. Hua hua! A series of sounds rang out. Sure enough, 11 number plates scattered in midair. Without waiting for Xiaohua to make a move, the dozen or so cultivators on the left were all moved. Each of them urged their flying talismans to rush towards those number plates. Xiaohua wasn't nervous. He stood in midair with his hands behind his back, and he coldly laughed. I want to see who dares to take away these number plates under my eyes. Swoosh! All the cultivators immediately came to their senses and uniformly stood in midair, not daring to take even half a step forward. Xiao. Fellow Taoist Xiao, you already have 14 number plates. You're definitely going to be a disciple of the Imperial Thunder Sect. A cultivator timidly said. These 11 number plates. Senior, please be merciful and give them to whoever you find pleasing to the eye. If we enter the Imperial Thunder Sect, we'll all follow fellow Taoist Zhao's lead. Xiaohua waved his hand, and those 11 number plates fell into his storage bag. He looked around and shook his head. I have no interest in your so-called cultivation family's methods. You guys should go find your own opportunities. Everyone's face revealed regret, but seeing that it was getting late, they didn't dare to stay any longer. Just as they were about to fly away, they heard Xiaohua say, Fellow Taoists called Ma Miaoming, you don't need to leave. Leave your number plate behind and return to the Thunderclap Peak by yourself. You. Ma Miaoming already had a bad feeling in his heart. Hearing Xiaohua's words, he bitterly smiled and said, Fellow Taoist Xiao, I just want to protect myself. If I don't curry favor with Jiang Mingxiao, I also won't. Fellow Taoist Ma. There are thousands upon thousands of cultivation paths in the world. You can choose any one of them. Since you've chosen the path of relying on Jiang Mingxiao, you naturally have the awareness of your choice. In order to curry favor with Jiang Mingxiao, you dared to offend I, so you'll have to accept I's punishment. Xiaohua indifferently said, Fortunately, this is an illusion. You'll only leave your number plate behind as a lesson, and won't lose your life. If you're outside the illusion array, This Ma Miaoming looked at the crowd that had long since fled and sighed. He slapped his storage bag, and unexpectedly, there were 2 number plates inside. He bitterly smiled and said, I've worked hard for so long, but in the end, I've made wedding clothes for others. Forget it, forget it. As he spoke, Ma Miaoming took 2 steps forward, waved his hand, and the 2 number plates flew towards Xiaohua. Seeing Ma Miaoming take 2 steps forward, Xiaohua's eyes narrowed. He waved his hand, and the 2 number plates stopped in his hand. However, it only stopped for a moment. Then Xiaohua waved his hand again, and the 2 number plates suddenly flew behind Xiaohua. Woo! A strange roar sounded. One of the 2 number plates suddenly turned into a long snake-like monster. It circled in the air and flew towards Xiaohua. Yu Ma Miaoming, who was in front of Xiaohua, looked at Xiaohua in surprise. You? How did you know? How I know is not important. What's important is, you missed the opportunity one gave you. Xiaohua stood between Ma Miaoming and the other number plate, coldly looking at Ma Miaoming's gradually disappearing figure. That number plate was obviously Ma Miaoming's own number plate. He probably took it out to trick Xiaohua. And the monster that pounced towards Xiaohua also disappeared along with Ma Miaoming's disappearance. Opportunity? What opportunity? Ma Miaoming's figure disappeared, but he still didn't understand. Chapter 1528. Cultivator aristocratic families are really unfathomable. Although Xiaohua's expression didn't change as he watched the roaring monster gradually disappear, his heart had long since turned upside down. Let's not talk about being able to use a magic tool while still in the qi refining stage. Let's not talk about being able to teach a complete cultivation technique to the main family's disciples. Just this monster, that spirit-seeking talisman, that soul-absorbing bell, and other strange methods cannot be underestimated. And that Jinghua City's Zhu clan, perhaps because they were in the limelight back then, they were able to shake the cultivator sections. That's why they suffered an unexpected calamity, and were implanted with talismans. Thinking of this, Xiaohua unconsciously pinched his chin. He was thinking a little too far. In the past 2 years, Xiaohua had been practicing diligently, and at the same time, he had also taken out all the cultivation methods that he could practice and read them. He had basically finished reading the Zhu family's booklet. What was recorded in it was completely different from the cultivation methods and talismans of the current Shi country's cultivation world. It only talked about souls and talismans. It was also very different from the talismans that Xiaohua had obtained from Xiao Nan's Cheng family. Although Xiaohua could somewhat understand it, he was still more confused. Of course, that book didn't talk about talismans in detail. It only said that talismans were magical powers left behind from ancient times, and were recorded in a strange language. That's all. Then, it talked about the Zhu clan's failed attempts to break talismans. Of course, from this little content, Xiaohua faintly felt that these things were extremely useful. However, Xiaohua didn't have the slightest clue as to where and how to use them. Perhaps after I learn talismans in the future, I'll be able to thoroughly understand the secrets of this booklet and find the reason. Xiaohua patted his forehead and bitterly smiled at his own thoughts. At this time, Xiaohua had already obtained 26 number plates. Adding his own, that was a total of 27 number plates, more than double his previous estimate of 12 number plates. This harvest was more than enough for the Imperial Thunder Sect's disciple selection this time. Xiaohua also didn't want to attract too much attention. So he descended and sat on a large red rock, preparing to quietly wait for the arrival of dawn. However, just as Xiaohua sat down, he suddenly felt that something was wrong. Oh my, how could I forget Shui? Recalling Shui's rude and unreasonable appearance when she had just entered the illusion array, Xiaohua couldn't help but think of Fairy Hongxia's beautiful and understanding eyes. And in front of Kai Hongfeng, Fairy Hongxia resolutely prepared to stand up for Xiaohua. Valiant and formidable. Maybe she has already joined the Huanhua sect? It's been 2 years since we last met, so she must have made a breakthrough in her cultivation. Let's just say she's in the 11th layer of qi refining. Thinking up to this point, Xiaohua's heart seemed to be filled with lofty sentiments. He couldn't sit still anymore. Clenching his fists, he stood up and laughed brightly. Damn it, I'm also in the 10th layer of the aura refining realm. From today onwards, I'm no longer a toad. Hee a white swan. Can I eat your flesh? At this moment, Xiaohua seemed to have changed into another person. His face once again carried a trace of laziness and confidence, and there was even a hint of craftiness in his eyes. It was a far cry from the previous Xiaohua's deadpan appearance. It was also this strange temperament that caused Shui's heart to be instantly planted with feelings. This was much more lethal than any pretty boy. Concubine, dual cultivation. Concubine. Xiaohua didn't know why, but he suddenly thought of the immortal beauty sect that Shui had mentioned. In his mind, Shui's figure and Fairy Hongxia's face also appeared. Oh my, this isn't some inner demon, right? Xiaohua hurriedly gathered his thoughts and thought to himself. Shui doesn't know. She thinks that I've recovered my cultivation within 2 years. But in reality, I've cultivated from the 4th layer of qi refining all the way to the 10th layer of qi refining without any bottlenecks or sluggishness. This inner demon. I really have to be careful. And let's not talk about this for now. I'd better go find Shui. After all, I came here with her. Don't hurt her heart. Xiaohua urged his transcendence energy and used the flight technique. Just as he was about to fly into the air, 2 divine senses swept over from his left. When they saw Xiaohua, they immediately locked onto him. There really are people who aren't afraid of death. Xiaohua also used his perception to sweep the area. He immediately understood that these 2 were also 11th layer aura refining cultivators. Surrounding the 2 of them were several dozen 9th and 10th layer aura refining cultivators. Although Xiaohua's divine sense couldn't see the people clearly, it was very easy for him to see through everyone's cultivation levels. These 2 clearly came prepared. As soon as their divine senses locked onto Xiaohua, they each took out 2 different yellow talismans. They spat out a mouthful of blood essence and stuck the talismans on their bodies. A rather strange fluctuation emerged from their blood vessels and stimulated their meridians. As a result, their transcendence energy suddenly increased by more than 30% compared to before. Strange. As Xiaohua sensed, he suddenly remembered that he was still thinking about the secrets of the cultivation families. He couldn't help but feel that something was wrong. He wasn't afraid of 11th layer qi refining cultivators, but the problem was that these were two 11th layer qi refining cultivators. Moreover, they both had secret magic tools. Look, one was shaped like an alms bowl, the other was shaped like a small pagoda. Under the urging of the two's transcendence energy, they emitted different scattered lights and flew towards Xiaohua following their divine senses. Moreover, the dozens of 9th and 10th layer qi refining cultivators surrounding these two cultivators were like hungry wolves who saw a little sheep. All kinds of yellow talismans were raised in their hands and urged the flight talismans to fly over like a swarm of bees. Xiaohua wasn't willing to fight against these people. Isn't it just 20 or so number plates? This young master wants you to watch so you won't be able to eat them. Xiaohua coldly snorted. He formed a hand seal and his figure drilled into the ground. In front of 4 foundation establishment cultivators, Xiaohua could easily escape. Now facing 11th layer qi refining cultivators, Xiaohua simply didn't have any burden. Fellow Taoist Yuan, this guy has an earth escape talisman. A delicate, baby-faced cultivator with delicate features formed a hand seal to activate the small alms bowl, and shouted with some astonishment. Hee fellow Taoist men, eyes incompetent, I'll go first. The other square-faced cultivator with a somewhat dull appearance activated the small pagoda. He slapped his hand and took out an earth escape talisman from his storage pouch and said, I just so happen to have a few earth escape talismans. Fellow Taoist Yuan, please wait. Fellow Taoist Min frowned and said, from what the other fellow Taoist just said, this guy has some divine abilities. Jiang Mingxiao and Wang Qiming of Guangxian were eliminated by this guy. If we didn't join forces, I'm afraid we'd have to be very careful. This fellow Taoist Yuan slightly hesitated. He slapped his hand and took out another earth escape talisman and threw it to fellow Taoist Min, saying, fellow Taoist Min, I'll give you an earth escape talisman. This is Xiaohua's number plate, haha, no need. Fellow Taoist Yuan waved his hand, and the earth escape talisman flew back to fellow Taoist Min. Fellow Taoist Yuan turned his head and said, if any fellow Taoist has extra earth escape talismans, I'll give you the first number plate. I have one. Just as fellow Taoist Yuan finished speaking, a cultivator took out several earth escape talismans from his storage pouch and handed them over. This cultivator was the one who followed Jiang Mingxiao from the Chonglian village. Good, fellow Taoist fan, if I gets the number plate, your two won't be able to escape. Fellow Taoist Yuan was overjoyed and reached out to catch it. He slapped his hand and pointed with his finger. The alms bowl flashed and fell into fellow Taoist Yuan's hand. He looked at fellow Taoist Min and smiled. Shall we go down now? Hee please. Fellow Taoist Min also put away the small pagoda. The two of them flashed and chased down from different directions. Fellow Taoist fan still had some earth escape talismans and loudly asked, what should we do? Fellow Taoist Yuan said, if you want to come, then come. Whoever contributed the most would get the most. There are more than 20 number plates. Fellow Taoist Min smiled brightly and had already entered the earth. However, fellow Taoist fan and the other cultivators looked at each other. None of them dared to rashly fly down. After all, there weren't many cultivators with earth escape talismans, not even 40% of them. They wouldn't be willing to team up and chase down a cultivator who could kill an 11th layer qi condensation cultivator, even if they had 10 times the courage. Fellow Taoist fan hesitated for a moment, then said in a low voice, we will just wait here. If fellow Taoist Yuan and fellow Taoist Min succeed, then we'll get some benefits. If not, then we'll think of something else. Another way? Everyone's hearts trembled when they heard this. They looked around and quickly flew to a place where there was no one around. What else could they do? In order to protect themselves, they first sought the protection of an 11th layer qi condensation cultivator. Then, with the help of the 11th layer qi condensation cultivator's divine sense, they hunted down stray cultivators. Although they killed a lot of them, in the end there was still a limit. They had gathered all the number plates of the 11th layer qi condensation cultivators, but they still didn't have enough. In the end, there there were no more cultivators to kill, so they could only kill each other. For example, if fellow Daoist Fan hadn't revealed Xiaohua's information, his number plate would have been snatched away by someone else long ago. Everyone was on guard, yellow talismans in hand. Not only were they looking at each other, but they were also staring at the ground, ready to be summoned by the two 11th layer Qi condensation cultivators at any time. At this moment, the air was still clear, and the horizon was faintly white. This was the sign of dawn. If nothing unexpected happened, after a meal, the light of dawn would appear, and the Imperial Thunder Sect's disciple selection would come to an end. Seeing the anxiety in everyone's hearts, a few of the more quick-witted ones had other ideas. But at this moment, from the ground beneath everyone's feet, a jet-black brilliance suddenly shot out. With lightning speed, it stabbed into fellow Daoist Fan's feet. Fellow Daoist Fan didn't even have time to react. The Iron Cloak Talisman and other defensive yellow talismans on his body were pierced. As the faint brilliance flickered, fellow Daoist Fan only had time to put on a look of astonishment. His entire body began to sway and gradually disappeared. Bang! At the same time fellow Daoist Fan disappeared, a number plate appeared in midair. Haha, the fat cultivator closest to fellow Daoist Fan already had some yellow talismans in his hand. When he saw the number plate appear, he grinned and threw the yellow talismans in his hand, forcing the surrounding cultivators to retreat. He flew a few steps forward and reached out to grab the number plate. But just as his hand touched the number plate, a cold voice sounded in his ear. You dare to take this young master's things? Chapter 1529. This voice was very unfamiliar, but in the fat cultivator's ears, it was no less than a clap of thunder. Senior, please spare my life. The fat cultivator hastily withdrew his hand, but it was already too late. The jet-black brilliance that had just killed fellow Daoist Fan had returned. In the blink of an eye, it had pierced between the fat cultivator's eyebrows. The fat cultivator naturally wouldn't allow himself to be captured without putting up a fight. He flung out a yellow talisman in his hand, and an ice net talisman appeared in front of him. Gotcha! The ice net talisman didn't seem to be able to block the sharp black iron needle in the slightest. The fat cultivator only felt his vision darken, and he was transported back to the thunderclap peak. Damn it, this guy, who is he? So powerful. So fast. When his figure landed on the thunderclap peak, the fat cultivator still hadn't seen who had eliminated him. Within the illusory formation, Xiaohua waved his hand, and the two number plates fell into his storage pouch. At the same time, two flustered and exasperated voices came from the ground beneath his feet. Xiaohua, if you have the ability, don't run. Don't run? You think this young master is a fool? The corners of Xiaohua's mouth revealed a trace of a sneer. His figure suddenly flew up, and with a wave of his hand, the black iron needle appeared in the air again, killing a 7th level Qi refining cultivator. After taking a number plate, it flew in a certain direction. Behind Xiaohua were several tens of cultivators who were in a mess. At this moment, these cultivators couldn't help but make a move. Each of them took out their most convenient yellow talismans and methods. There were even a few people who took out their ancestral magic tools. They wanted to fight to the death when the sun rose from the east, and see if they could gather enough number plates. When fellow Daoist Yuan and fellow Daoist Min flashed out from the ground, they saw the chaotic scene. They wanted to berate them, but they tacitly kept their mouths shut. This was their final method to deal with the problem. Although they arrived a bit earlier, they still arrived. Fellow Daoist Yuan, should we still chase? Fellow Daoist Min glanced at the distant Xiaohua's figure, which wasn't very fast, and whispered. Still chase? My brain isn't sick. Fellow Daoist Yuan's eyes flashed with a trace of surprise, and he said, This Xiaohua already has enough number plates. He was still able to escape under the joint efforts of the two of us. He is definitely a disciple of the Imperial Thunder Sect. Since we are going to cultivate in the same sect in the future, how can we not form good karma? If we force them into a corner and force them to use whatever means they have, we will end up in a lose-lose situation. Then he looked at the chaos beneath his feet. Isn't this the best time to solve our problem? Fellow Taoist Min clapped his hands and said, "Great! I have the same idea." Then the two of them stood with their hands clasped behind their backs and quietly watched the fight in the field. But the distant Xiao Hua was at a loss. He used his perception to sweep over and over again, cursing in his heart. "Motherfuckers, why don't you chase after me? I'm still waiting to teach you a lesson." As he said this, he waved his hand, and the black iron needle flashed out from the rock behind him, flying into Xiao Hua's hand at an extremely fast speed. Since the two 11th layer qi refining cultivators didn't want to trouble Xiao Hua, and Xiao Hua himself didn't have any desire to win, the two of them joining forces could still put up a fight against Xiao Hua. If Xiao Hua didn't reveal his trump card, he would only be able to fight to a draw. There was no need to haggle over this any further. Thinking of this, Xiao Hua released his perception. His figure leisurely floated up, and he flew in a certain direction. At this moment, the sky was about to brighten. All the cultivators knew this was their last chance. Almost all the temporary small groups were in conflict. Of the 15 11th layer qi refining cultivators, 2 had been eliminated by Xiao Hua, so there were still 13 left. These cultivators had already obtained a number plate that allowed them to pass the test. Some of them even seized a lot of number plates in order to gain the favor of the masters of the Imperial Thunder sect. Of course, these cultivators had some close friends with them, and for the sake of their future cultivation in the Imperial Thunder sect, they also gave some number plates to these people. Xiao Hua's day's search naturally attracted the attention of many cultivators. Among these cultivators, the majority of them already knew something from Xiao Hua's leisurely appearance. Looking at his peak 10th layer qi refining cultivation, they didn't dare to harass him. As soon as they saw Xiao Hua, they immediately ran far away, afraid that Xiao Hua would snatch away their number plates. Of course, there was still a small group of cultivators who had no other choice, or perhaps there was something wrong with their heads. Even though they knew they were no match for Xiao Hua, they still teamed up to attack Xiao Hua. This was because they also understood that Xiao Hua and the others definitely had 10 similar number plates in their storage pouches. As long as they had a chance, someone would immediately obtain a rare opportunity. Therefore, even though Xiao Hua didn't want to make a move, he still added another 13 number plates. When Xiao Hua flew to the top of a steep mountain, a bright red sun slowly rose from the east, illuminating the entire illusory realm with a dazzling light. Rumble, rumble, rumble. The mountains shook and the earth quaked. Countless mountain ranges began to sink, and countless forests gushed out from the ground. Following the changes in the illusory realm, many cultivators who used earth escape talismans were pushed out from the ground by the formation. "It's her. Hurry. Just a moment ago, when I killed a cultivator, 7 or 8 number plates fell from that person's body. This cultivator took advantage of Ai's inattention and scuttled out from the ground, taking away all of those number plates." A coarse voice shouted, "Now I still lack 3 number plates. Fellow Taoist, help I kill this cultivator, and I will give the other 5 number plates to him." Hee, this cultivator is actually interesting. Xiao Hua's mouth held a smile, and he inwardly said, "Why is it similar to this young master's previous behavior? As long as I get a good deal, I'll immediately run far away. This cultivator who had his number plate stolen, I'm afraid he doesn't have an earth escape talisman, right?" While thinking, Xiao Hua inadvertently swept his perception over, but when he sensed Shue's very familiar magic power fluctuations, his heart immediately jumped. Without the slightest hesitation, he released the black iron needle. In the distance, Shue was also in a critical situation. Her cultivation was just at the 7th level of qi refining, far from enough in this illusory realm. Fortunately, she had an earth escape talisman on her, so she could hide underground. Of course, the most important thing was that she was born in a cultivation family. Misty Mountain naturally had a few ancestral magic tools for her to use. One was a magic tool that could conceal magic power, and the other was a bewildering cloak, which could protect her completely. Of course, if it was only like this, she was afraid she would only be able to see Xiao Hua after sunrise. If Xiao Hua had more number plates, he might be able to give them to her, but most likely, that was impossible. Therefore, Shue also had her own plans. She relied on her magic tool to walk under the feet of others, always paying attention to the movements on the ground. Just now, when Xiaohua heard that cultivator with the loud voice, he also deserved it. This guy also exhausted his mental and physical strength to use a magic tool to kill a cultivator, whose cultivation was about the same as his own. Moreover, 8 number plates fell from that cultivator's body, which really made him overjoyed. In the end, this guy was in a daze, giving Shui, who had been coveting their fight underground for a long time, an opportunity. She was just a bit faster than that cultivator with the loud voice. Shui took the 8 number plates into her pouch, and in addition, in order to escape, she suffered a blow from the other party's magic tool, seriously injuring her body. In the future, she could only barely maintain her strength and hide underground. If she wanted to wait until sunrise, she would have the opportunity to strive for the top 100 with the 9 number plates. However, things didn't go as she wished. In the end, this illusory formation still had to move mountains and overturn seas to restore it to its original state. Shui's magic power was already insufficient, so she was even more unable to resist the repelling force underground. Like the others, she was sent out of the ground. Of course, a cultivator with magic power like her basically didn't exist in this illusory formation. Even if she only had 1 number plate, she would still be killed by others. Moreover, she just so happened to run into an enemy. She saw that cultivator with the loud voice activate his magic tool, and a round, large copper hammer-like magic tool struck down from the sky. Before it could even get close to Tenjiang, the whistling sound of the wind enveloped Shui. At the side, several other cultivators around the 9th layer of qi refining also had smiles on their faces. Each of them used their divine abilities, sending yellow talismans and magic tools to greet Shui's body. They didn't have any intention of showing mercy to a woman. Alas, yesterday's fun, today's sad memories. This place is still here. People are not the people of yesterday. Thanks for the memory, the wrong poem. I wish him good luck. Shui saw the vicious methods of the crowd, and her heart felt a burst of sadness. She was too lazy to summon the magic tool in her hand, and silently recited a few lines of the poem. Her body stopped in the air, and her eyes looked towards the horizon where the sun was rising from the east. Her face was indifferent. Just as Shui was about to give up, a despairing howl echoed out. Under the golden rays of the sun, a lightning-like black ray mysteriously flashed through the eyes of the loud voice. Following the disappearance of the loud voice, the bronze hammer that was less than a meter away from Shui's forehead slowly disappeared. Moreover, the loud voice didn't lie. From the place where he disappeared, there really were 7 number plates that fell out. At this moment, the eyes of the cultivators that attacked Shui emitted a green light. The magic tools and yellow talismans that were attacking Shui naturally wouldn't be retracted, and the cultivators themselves flew towards those number plates. Humph! A voice that Shui was familiar with descended from the sky. Immediately after, a sentence that Shui had never heard before, but from now on, she was afraid that she would frequently hear it resounded throughout the entire place. These are this young master's things. I want to see who dares to touch them. Xiaohua. Shui groaned in her heart, and slightly turned her head. Looking at Xiaohua who was flying towards her from the horizon, she made a very strange movement. Shui? She actually didn't care about the magic tools that were attacking her, and instead raised her hand, and very attentively combed the messy hair in front of her forehead. There's no mistake, right? Seeing this, Xiaohua couldn't help but stare blankly. He killed that cultivator with the loud voice, of course, because he wanted to let Shui block some of the remaining magic tools and yellow talismans. Who would have thought that the other party's big sister would actually, a woman doll herself up for her lover? How could Xiaohua not vomit blood? This thing. What kind of situation is this? You're actually still thinking about this. Xiaohua truly understood what a female cultivator was. Chapter 1530. Fortunately, Xiaohua's black iron needle had already flown to Shui's left side. Xiaohua tried his best to fly to Shui's side, while controlling the black iron needle to break the magic tools and yellow talismans one by one. It has to be said that this black iron needle is really powerful. Not only can it break the defensive yellow talismans on a cultivator's body, it is also not at a disadvantage against other people's magic tools. The only thing that makes Xiaohua unhappy is that this black iron needle is still too light. When it fights against magic tools, it seems light as a feather. Seeing Xiaohua descend like a god, Shui revealed a smile. Xiaohua, you came? Hehe, if you were half a step late, I'm afraid you wouldn't be able to see me. As she spoke, her body slightly swayed and her eyes slightly closed, as if she was about to fall from the sky. Xiaohua didn't dare to be careless. He quickly flew up and grabbed Shue's arm. Shui leaned on Xiaohua's shoulder. Xiaohua was a bit uncomfortable. He slightly used his arm, and only gave it to Shui. Shui nestled next to Xiaohua's arm. She seemed to be seriously injured, but her slightly opened eyes flashed with joy that others didn't know. Xiaohua grabbed Shue's arm with one hand and patted with the other hand. Dozens of top-quality fireball talismans were taken out and shot out like a fairy scattering flowers. He already had experience controlling black iron needles, so controlling these fireball talismans was simply a piece of cake. At this time, those cultivators also put those number plates into their storage pouches. They hurriedly took out fireball talismans, icicle talismans, and other yellow talismans from their storage pouches. There were even other high-level yellow talismans and magic tools to fight against the exploding fireballs that filled the air. Rumble, rumble, rumble. Loud sounds came one after another, blasting these cultivators into dust. They were not stingy with these fireball talismans. Those fireball talismans couldn't hurt them, but they were still in a difficult situation, right? Of course, the most important thing was that within these fireball talismans, Xiaohua's black iron needles began to display their might again. These cultivators were all in the 9th and 10th layer of the qi refining realm. They were far from having divine sense, so the speed of the black iron needles was absolutely not something they could perceive. Following the explosion of the fireball talismans and Xiaohua's use of this chaos, miserable screams and disbelief were transmitted from the chaos. The magic tools and yellow talismans attacking Xiaohua and Shui also gradually disappeared. After the power of the fireball talisman passed, there were still traces of heat waves in the air. Only 22 number plates were left scattered in the air. At this moment, an 11th level qi refining cultivator slowly appeared in front of Xiaohua. It was a handsome young man. He wasn't very tall, but his face was somewhat arrogant. He wore a rarely seen white Taoist robe. Invisibility talisman? Xiaohua's eyes slightly narrowed. He seemed to know that those cultivators from earlier should have been recruited by this 11th level qi condensation cultivator. Xiaohua's figure did not move. The black iron needle also stopped above the number plate. He coldly looked at the white-clothed cultivator. The white-clothed cultivator also looked at Xiaohua. At the same time, his divine sense swept over and locked onto the black iron needle. It seemed to be a type of compromise, and also seemed to have seen the power of the black iron needle. The white-clothed cultivator's eyes flashed. His entire figure once again concealed itself in the air, but it was unknown where he went. Once the white-clothed cultivator left, Xiaohua released his perception. He looked again and again, but he still didn't find any clues. Granny! This young master was truly a bit careless. Just now, when I killed a few 11th level qi refining cultivators, I already felt invincible. If this guy used an invisibility talisman and rashly attacked me, it's really hard to say what the result would be. Xiaohua was somewhat afraid. He waved his hand and the 22 number plates flew into his hand. Xiaohua used his arm to nudge Shui. He called out. The third trial is about to end. Why haven't you taken the number plates yet? Sure enough, Shui struggled to straighten her body. She waved her hand and 3 number plates flew into her hand. She weakly said, I only need 3. He nodded. Those 19 number plates were also put into his storage pouch. Swoosh, just as Xiaohua put away the number plates, 2 multicolored lights flashed in the air, enveloping Xiaohua and Shui. After a while, the scenery changed. When everything stopped, Xiaohua and Shui once again appeared in the open space of Seeking Thunder Valley. The thunderbolt that previously sent everyone here had already stopped in midair above the open space. Fellow Taoists, this time, the disciple selection of my Imperial Thunder Sect has officially ended. Everyone, please properly keep the number plates you received. Do not take them out by any means. Otherwise, you will be immediately expelled. Although the voice was slightly immature, it was very strict. The people who had just been transported out didn't dare to do anything. As for the people who had been eliminated before, Xiaohua looked at the open space and didn't see any traces of them. Presumably, the Imperial Thunder Sect had already made arrangements. Fellow Taoists, please board the Thunder Boat. After 15 minutes, the restriction here will take effect. If any fellow Taoists still want to train in seeking Thunder Valley, then properly stay here. The voice unexpectedly relaxed and said a witty sentence. Naturally, after this voice finished shouting, all the cultivators on the open space, regardless of whether their faces were indifferent, tranquil, excited, vexed, regretful, perturbed, or other kinds of emotions, urged their magic power and flew onto the thunderboat one after another. Shui was even more so. Her body leaned against Xiaohua, her arm tightly attached to Xiaohua's arm. She simply didn't use a trace of magic power. Looking at her moist big eyes, it was clearly a kind of innocence. It seemed to be saying, "Heavily injured, powerless, please." Xiaohua shrugged. He felt a burst of panic for no reason. Although Shui was voluptuous, her weight was still a lot worse than the tip of the devil's spear. Xiaohua urged his magic power. His figure very leisurely landed on the thunder boat. Beside him, that white-clothed cultivator also landed. Seeing Xiaohua and then looking at Shui beside Xiaohua, that white-clothed cultivator cupped his hands and said with a smile, "I am Zhitsong King Yin Xiao. Congratulations to junior brother for entering the Imperial Thunder Sect. In the future, we will all be fellow disciples of the same sect. Junior brother, please take care of us in the future." Afterwards, without waiting for Xiaohua to speak, he looked left and right and said in a low voice, "Junior sister, if your injuries aren't heavy, stand up for the time being. Otherwise, if by any chance you are disliked by some master, a punishment for no reason is not worth it." Shui's face slightly reddened. She hurriedly straightened up and left Xiaohua's arm. Xiaohua let out a sigh of relief. He felt that fighting against an 11th level Qi refinement cultivator was more exhausting. He also cupped his hands and said, "I am Xiaohua. Greetings to senior brother Wang. Disciple is a loose cultivator. My knowledge is shallow." Loose cultivator? Wang Yunxiao's face was extremely moved. He looked Xiaohua up and down and said with a sigh, "Junior brother Xiao is a talent with outstanding aptitude. When you entered, you were buried among loose cultivators. If it wasn't for the fact that the Imperial Thunder Sect didn't stick to one pattern in selecting disciples this time, junior brother Xiao, I'm afraid you would be a pearl cast into darkness for a lifetime." Hearing Wang Yunxiao's words, Xiaohua's heart was moved. He asked curiously, "When other sects recruit disciples, as long as they are above the 10th level of Qi refinement, could it be that there is something special about the Imperial Thunder Sect?" A strange expression appeared on Wang Yunxiao's face. Just as he was about to speak, he heard a voice call out, "Fellow Taoists, you can rest in your places and take medicinal pills. We'll bring you all to Zhenlei Palace now." Zhenlei Palace? Wang Yunxiao's face showed joy. He looked at Xiaohua and cupped his hands. Without saying anything, he sat down and began to meditate. Shui was already injured in the illusion. Naturally, she took medicinal pills and guided the medicinal power to nourish her meridians. Seeing that everyone was sitting cross-legged, Xiaohua had no choice but to sit down and silently use his cultivation method. Not long after, a huge mountain peak appeared in front of them. On the mountain peak, there were many palaces and countless pavilions. Many immortal birds and immortal beasts leisurely strolled in the forest. In the forest, there were many exotic flowers and plants that bloomed. The thunderboat gradually slowed down and landed in front of a majestic palace. In the palace's square, there were many young cultivators. Some of them were in the 7th level of Qi refinement, while others were in the 90th level of Qi refinement. They were all standing solemnly. Opposite these young cultivators were even more children. Their cultivation levels ranged from the first level to the 6th level. These children were standing in a neat formation, but how could they stand still? Some were playing, some were sitting, and many were even playing with yellow talismans. Of course, the thunderbolts landing attracted everyone's attention. Many young children were running after the thunderbolt. Some of them even wanted to use their flying talismans to fly into the air. Cough, cough. There was a low cough and a slightly old voice said, "Disciples on duty, why aren't you hurrying to maintain order? Although it's a rare happy day for our Imperial Thunder sect, we must remember the sect's rules." Immediately, dozens of young cultivators flew up and stopped these children. Although these children were naturally playful, they still had rules. When they saw their senior brothers fly up, they all obediently returned to their positions. They all stood with their hands behind their backs and pretended to be serious. Xiao Hua and the others stood on the thunderbolt. Seeing the lively scene in front of them, a warm feeling rose in their hearts. Especially Xiao Hua, it was as if he saw the scene in Yellowflower Ridge a few years ago. Instantly, his nose turned sour and his eyes filled with tears. The thunderbolt landed. A tall and thin cultivator flew up to the thunderbolt and scanned it with his divine sense. He smiled and said, "I am Genai, the deacon of Genlei Palace. In the future, I will be the martial uncle of 100 of you. Today, I will be in charge of the disciples entering the sect." "Greetings, Martial Uncle Gen." A few clever disciples began to bow and greet him. "Hee, it's too early to call me that." Gen waved his hand and said, "All of you, get off the thunderboat and follow the disciples to the side hall of Genlei Palace to register your number plates. At the same time, you can also test your bone age." "Yes, we will follow Martial Uncle Gen's orders." A few 11th level chi refining cultivators bowed and jumped off the thunderboat. Of course, a few disciples below led them to Genlei Palace. Shueshue Xiaohua and Shueshue jumped off the lightning boat. Just as Xiaohua was about to ask, a few young girls from the Lightning Conversion Palace ran over and giggled. "Fellow Taoist, the female cultivator is going to the other side hall. She definitely can't be together with these stinky men." Chapter 1531. Ah, stinky man? Xiaohua's eyes widened as he looked at these girls in disbelief. He didn't know what to say. "Hurry up and leave." One of the girls disdainfully glared at Xiaohua, then pulled Shueshue's hand and said, "Sister, let's wait for the other sisters here. And I'll listen to junior sister's instructions." Shueshue was the sweetest. She immediately smiled and gave Xiaohua a look. Okay, Xiaohua was defeated by this girl in his heart. He nodded and chased after Wang Yinxiao. He asked in a low voice, "Senior brother Wang, what's the bone age test for?" Knowing that Xiaohua was a loose cultivator, Wang Yinxiao was not surprised. He smiled and said, "The bone age test is to see how old fellow Taoist is." Oh, Xiaohua was somewhat enlightened. Hee, I'm a cultivator in the cultivation world, but it's not easy to tell my age from my appearance. Take me for example. When I was young, I ate some strange herbs, which helped me retain my youthful appearance. I look like I'm in my 20s, but in fact I'm already 32 years old. Therefore, when a cultivation sect recruits disciples, the disciples who pass the selection must have their bone age tested to find out their true age. If they are too old, even if their cultivation meets the requirements, they still can't be selected. Junior brother Xiao, think about it. If it's a 60-year-old cultivator at the late stage of qi refining, would the Imperial Thunder sect accept them? So it's like this. Xiaohua's heart skipped a beat. He was slightly uneasy. Look at junior brother Zhao's young appearance. On the surface, you look like you're only 17 or 18 years old. Hee, how can you cultivate to the 10th level of qi refining at this age? Fellow Taoist Xiao should have the same opportunity as me, right? Wang Yunxiao smiled thoughtfully. Xiaohua only smiled and didn't say anything. Wang Yunxiao also didn't ask. The bone age test was about to begin, so Xiaohua's age wouldn't be a secret. Oh, that's right. Junior brother Xiao, the Imperial Thunder sect, seems to have a rule. Wang Yunxiao suddenly said, It said that only cultivators above 35 years old will be accepted into the sect unless they are foundation building. What? Xiaohua stared blankly. He almost stood still and said in a low voice, "Why is there such a strange condition?" Wang Yunzhao's eyes flashed with understanding. He smiled and said, "Good for you to know, junior brother Xiao. In a normal cultivation sect, a disciple of the 12th layer should be around 38 years old. Even so, only 60% of these disciples can reach the late stage of the 12th layer, and only 30% can reach the foundation establishment stage." "So low?" Xiaohua exclaimed in a low voice. He felt that the disciples of cultivation sects seemed to be able to cultivate to the foundation establishment stage. Haha, fellow Taoist Xiao, if every disciple in a cultivation sect is able to reach foundation establishment, then wouldn't our Dawn Rain continent be filled with foundation establishment cultivators? Can it still be as rare as it is now? Wang Yunxiao said with a smile. It's precisely because foundation establishment is so difficult that those disciples over the age of 40, even if they cultivate to the late stage of the 12th layer of qi refining, they basically have no chance of breaking through to foundation establishment. Think about it, if a 35-year-old cultivator enters a cultivation sect, what kind of benefits can he bring to the cultivation sect? Xiaohua suddenly understood. That's right, even if a 35-year-old middle-stage qi refining cultivator enters the Imperial Thunder sect, he would only have 5 years to break through to foundation establishment. And from the middle stage of the 11th layer to the peak of the 12th layer, even a disciple who has been nurtured since childhood would need 5 to 10 years. How can a disciple who just entered the sect successfully enter foundation establishment? Since he can't enter foundation establishment, why would they still want this kind of disciple? Damn it, just how old is this young master? Xiaohua's heart began to beat faster. Seeing Xiaohua's expression change again, Wang Yunxiao didn't say anything else and slowly walked into the side hall of Zhenlei Palace. Although the side hall of Zhenlei Palace was called a side hall, in reality, it was equally majestic. The carved beams and painted pillars were incomparably exquisite. Countless talismans faintly flashed on the pillars, beams, doors, and windows. The various colors of light were very harmonious. It was unknown where the light came from, but it illuminated the entire side hall. Xiaohua followed Wang Yunxiao into the side chamber. At this time, the entire side chamber had more than 10 dark green tables arranged in an orderly manner on both sides of the side chamber. Behind each table, there was a late-stage foundation establishment realm old man sitting cross-legged. When Xiaohua entered, there was a cultivator in front of each table. These cultivators were sitting cross-legged in front of the tables. Those foundation establishment old men looked at them with their eyes, swept them with their divine sense, and even walked up to them and used their hands to pinch them. Then, with a wave of their hand, a different colored light flashed. Some things were recorded in the jade slips in their hands. Finally, they waved their hands and let the cultivators who were tested leave from the other side of the side hall. Not long after, it was Xiaohua's turn. Xiaohua very nervously walked in front of an old man with white hair and a youthful complexion. He bowed and saluted. "Junior Xiaohua greets senior. And sit down first." That old man looked up and said indifferently, "You don't need to panic. Even if you've eaten strange herbs and your age is a bit old, that's your fate. Even if you can't cultivate, there's still the riches and honor of the mortal world. Go and pursue them on your own." "Yes, Junior understands." Xiaohua respectfully sat in front of the table. Just like before, the old man carefully looked at Xiaohua from head to toe. His eyes revealed a trace of surprise. Then an abundant divine sense locked onto Xiaohua and enveloped him from head to toe. Xiaohua's heart moved. He also released his perception. Sure enough, that old man didn't notice. The old man's divine sense released a trace of strange fluctuation. It was through Xiaohua's bones. It should be the Imperial Thunder sect's so-called bone testing technique. Io. That old man looked at Xiaohua's bones from head to toe several times. He couldn't help but cry out, "Strange. There's something wrong with your bone age." Ah. Xiaohua's head began to sweat. He felt his perception withdraw and asked nervously, "Junior? How old is Junior? And, you seem to be several hundred years old, or perhaps 1,000 years old, but you also seem to be 4, 5, or 18 years old. The foundation establishment old man said very casually, but as soon as he said it, he realized something and berated. You don't know how old you are? You actually have to ask this old man? He Junior is 23 years old this year. Of course I know. Xiaohua's heart moved and he laughed. Do I need you to tell me? That foundation establishment old man stood up, stretched out his hand, and touched all the bones in Xiaohua's body. He touched no less than, in the time it took to drink a cup of tea, almost all the bones in Xiaohua's body were touched. This time, he withdrew his hand in satisfaction. He glared at Xiaohua and scolded jokingly. You actually dare to make fun of this old man. When there's time in the future, this old man will take care of you, brat. Xiaohua turned pale with fright. He asked urgently, Junior, how old is Junior? At this time in the distance, Wang Yunxiao had already finished measuring his bone age. Looking at Xiaohua, who came in at almost the same time as him, his eyes were even more contemptuous. How old are you? You should know. The foundation establishment old man swiped his hand, and a fine light flashed. Everything related to Xiaohua was recorded in a jade slip. Go, the old man said coldly, then looked at the next cultivator. His grandmother. Xiaohua cursed in his heart. I'm afraid I can't pass this test. It seems that before I'm driven out of Mount Lama, I should find an opportunity to take out that pearl, and see if I can plead for leniency. Xiaohua thought as he walked out of this side chamber. At this time, outside the side chamber there was a long line. At the end of the line was also a side chamber. Xiaohua was somewhat dejected. Drooping his head, he silently followed the crowd. Although the line was very long, it was also very fast. Before long, it was Xiaohua's turn. Xiaohua walked in. Inside there were 4 12th-layer qi refining cultivators, and 1 early-stage foundation establishment cultivator. They stood in the center of the side chamber, respectively. Behind them were 3 large doors. The figure of the cultivator in front of Xiaohua disappeared into the middle door. Xiaohua weakly walked in front of the 5 cultivators and bowed in greeting. Junior Xiaohua greets seniors. Those cultivators saw Xiaohua's expression and understood. They smiled and said, Fellow Taoist, don't be discouraged. Although you can't enter my Imperial Thunder sect, there are other sects that you can join. Fellow Taoist Zhao's 10th layer qi refining cultivation is also extremely welcomed by some sects. And many thanks for seniors' consolation. Xiaohua was somewhat spirited in advance, and walked towards the middle door. Fellow Taoist Xiao is going the wrong way. The middle door is for those cultivators whose number of tokens isn't confirmed to be within the top 100. You should go to the left door. Outside that door is the Thunderboat. It can directly send fellow Taoists to Thunderclap Peak. A cultivator very politely reminded. Oh, okay. Xiaohua casually agreed. He turned around and walked towards the left door. But just as he took 2 steps, he came to his senses and said anxiously, What? The left door leads to Thunderclap Peak? Yes. That cultivator smiled and said, Fellow Taoist Xiao, there are already more than 10 10th layer and 9th layer qi refining fellow Taoists in front of you. Fellow Taoist Xiao doesn't need to feel ashamed. Damn it. Xiaohua said inwardly. He quickly walked back and pointed with his finger. The right door, is it for those who can confirm to pass the 3rd trial? Of course. Another cultivator saw through the clues and asked curiously. Could it be that fellow Taoist Xiao has 12 tokens? Of course. Xiaohua finally felt proud and elated. He clapped his hands, and with a crash sound, a pile of tokens was thrown to the ground by this guy. He pointed with his finger and said very innocently, Junior has 61 tokens. I don't know if I passed the trial or not. What? 61 tokens? Not only were the 4 12th layer qi refining cultivators flabbergasted, even the early stage foundation building cultivator was moved. That cultivator scanned with his divine sense and knew the number of tokens. His eyes flashed again and again. He glanced at Xiaohua a few times and said to the disciple next to him in a low voice, Why aren't you quickly collecting them? These 61 number plates are genuine. Chapter 1532. Tsk Tisk, one of the 4 cultivators, smacked his lips and waved his hand. The pile of number plates on the ground was collected into his storage pouch. He said, "That 10th layer aura refining cultivator just now was so proud of himself after getting 8 number plates. He directly called me Senior Marshal Brother, Senior Marshal Brother. This person is also at the 10th layer. He actually got so many number plates. I wonder, how many cultivators died in his hands in the illusion formation?" "Then can Junior go through the door on the left?" Xiaohua asked weakly. "Go. If you still can't go, then I'm afraid none of the cultivators participating in the 3rd trial will be able to go." The Foundation Establishment cultivator waved his hand. A fine light flashed, and Xiaohua's name and other information were written into the jade slip in his hand. Xiaohua cupped his hands and leisurely walked through the door on the left. Outside the door was a corridor. In the corridor, there were several 5th and 6th layer aura refining children. When they saw Xiaohua walk in, they all beamed with joy and raised their hands. "Senior Marshal Brother. This way." "Hee, thank you, Junior Marshal Brother." Xiaohua's heart was somewhat relaxed. He smiled and returned the greeting, then followed the children through the long gallery. There were many pictures in this gallery. Some were of demonic beasts, some were of cultivators, and some were of exotic flowers and plants. There were even scenes of fighting flickering with lightning. Xiaohua looked left and right while entering the palace door at the end of the gallery. The palace gate was extremely tall and wide. After passing through the gate, there was an incomparably huge palace. At the top of the palace was a platform that was a few feet tall. It was suspended in midair. The platform was very large, about 30% of the entire palace. In front of the platform was a flat ground. At this moment, there were already some cultivators standing on the flat ground. The men stood on the right, and the women on the left. Shui was eagerly waiting. When she saw Xiaohua's face full of surprise, she waved her white hand in front of her chest. Xiaohua nodded slightly, then looked at the male cultivators. Sure enough, Wang Yinxiao was already standing there. Fellow Taoist Yuan and fellow Taoist Min also appeared as expected. Seeing Xiaohua come over, the two looked at each other and cupped their hands. "Fellow Taoist Xiao really passed. We don't know each other until we fight. In the future, we'll be fellow Senior Marshal Brothers. Let's be more intimate." Wang Yinxiao saw fellow Taoist Min and fellow Taoist Yuan talking together, and was slightly surprised. "I, Xiaohua, formally greet you two fellow Taoists." Xiaohua smiled and cupped his hands. Now he was somewhat confused. Did he really pass? If his age didn't pass, then shouldn't the Foundation Establishment old man have let him in? But if his age was acceptable, why would the old man say that there was a problem with his bone age? Would he say that she was lying to him again? "I Huan Yuanbo greets fellow Taoist Xiao. I am Gold City's Min Ge. Greetings to fellow Xiao." The two of them respectively saluted. Xiaohua was able to escape from their joint attack, so his strength was definitely not something they could underestimate. In the future, they would be cultivating in the same sect, so how could they not have the intention to befriend him? Xiaohua knew that this was the communication method of the cultivation aristocratic families. Although he felt disdain in his heart, he didn't want to slap a smiling face, so he cupped his hands and returned the greeting. Seeing that Xiaohua wasn't too affectionate towards them, Mingu and Yi Zichen knew that this guy still held a grudge against them for joining hands in the illusion formation. They didn't say anything else and retreated to the side, waiting for the results of the disciple selection to be announced. Closely following Xiaohua into the main hall were several tens of people. Afterwards, no more cultivators entered. The boy who led Xiaohua and the others enclosed the main hall's door. Xiaohua released his perception and nodded slightly. He inwardly said, "There are a total of 64 people in this main hall. Among them, there are also some boys who were selected during the first trial of the Thunderclap Peak. These disciples in front of me are still 36 short of 100. I'm afraid that the remaining disciples will be selected from the cultivators in the middle gate." Sure enough, in the time it took to finish a meal, a deafening thunderclap resounded in the air above the palace, and it gave Xiaohua fright. After that, a melodious and continuous string music resounded once more, and when it entered one's ears, It caused one to be fascinated. Along with the string music, a small gate appeared on the left side of the high platform. From that gate, another 30 or so cultivators filed out. These cultivators' faces carried excitement, rejoicing, and other complicated expressions. Following the boys who led the way in front, they stood on both sides of the high platform. Fellow Taoists. Hee, I should call you martial nephews. A voice resounded. The thin and tall middle stage foundation establishment cultivator, Zhen, appeared on the high platform. With a wave of his hand, the string music stopped abruptly. He said in a clear voice, "Congratulations on passing the disciple selection of my Imperial Thunder Sect. You are now my Imperial Thunder Sect's disciples." Hearing this, Xiaohua felt as if a huge stone had been lifted from his heart. He let out a long sigh and bowed along with the others. He said, "Greetings to Martial Uncle General. Many thanks to Martial Uncle Gen for taking care of us. Hee, all of you rise." Zhen didn't hold back. He waved his hand and said, "My Imperial Thunder Sect's disciple selection has always been strict. In the past, there were only a dozen or so people who could stand in front of I in the Spring Thunder Hall. Today's scene of 94 people is truly a rare sight." 94 people? Xiaohua was slightly dazed. Didn't they say they were recruiting 100 people? Immediately after, Xiaohua came to a realization. I'm afraid there was more than one 100th disciple? In the end, they were all eliminated. Xiaohua's thoughts weren't wrong. Generally, the disciples of cultivation sects would take 12 or 13 number plates, and give the rest of the number plates to their subordinates. Fortunately, after entering the Imperial Thunder Sect, they would have a good relationship with others, and form their own forces. This way, there wouldn't be many disciples in the 90th place and the 100th place, making it easy to distinguish. Who would have thought that Xiaohua would suddenly obtain 62 number plates, which was 50 more? Naturally, the number of cultivators ranked 100 would increase by quite a bit. And it wasn't just a bit, it was a lot. As a result, the Imperial Thunder Sect, which could have recruited 6 more disciples, could only eliminate all the cultivators below the 94th disciple rank. Alright, this martial uncle won't say anything more. Although you're now my Imperial Thunder Sect's disciples, your temperament, background, aptitude, and so on still have to be tested. In the first year, you can only be considered preparatory disciples. If any disciple joins my Imperial Thunder Sect with an ulterior motive, not only will you not be able to become my Imperial Thunder Sect's official disciple, but, you won't be able to see the path down the Thunderclap Peak again. And that's what I was thinking. How can you join just by passing 3 tests? So there's still a year's worth of tests. If there are spies from some sects, the Imperial Thunder Sect will find some clues during this year. Xiaohua suddenly realized. The following matters will be divided into 2 rounds. The first round will be the sect's foundation building cultivators choosing the disciples they like. If any disciple is chosen by your master, they can directly follow their master to the Jade Archive Hall to register. Then follow their master back to their cave. In the second round, this martial uncle will announce the results of the selection of the remaining disciples for the senior brothers who didn't choose any disciples to refer to, so that they can find a suitable master for each disciple. As for the disciples who didn't find a master in the end, don't worry. My Zhenlei Palace's Technique Imparting Hall has disciples who specialize in imparting techniques to teach you. You only need to cultivate diligently, and there will definitely be a day when you can make a name for yourself. What's going on? Xiaohua was somewhat puzzled. How can I not find a master in the Imperial Thunder Sect? If that's the case, how is it different from cultivating outside? Oh right, the Imperial Thunder Sect will provide cultivation techniques, medicinal pills, spirit stones, and so on. Alas, cultivation is really like the sand being washed away by the waves. It's really not easy. Just as Xiaohua was smiling bitterly, the doors of the Spring Thunder Hall opened wide. Dozens or even hundreds of foundation-building cultivators in the late stage walked in wearing different Taoist robes with different expressions. Oh my god. I'm afraid there are hundreds of foundation-building cultivators, right? Xiaohua was dumbstruck. He had never seen so many foundation-building cultivators before. Although these cultivators didn't release their pressure, that kind of aura and that kind of prestige still suppressed Xiaohua and the others to the point that they couldn't breathe. That's right, after all. There were hundreds of almighty people who could pinch them to death at any time. Who wouldn't be careful? Greetings, seniors. The disciples felt the same as Xiaohua. Apart from fear, they were also excited. All of them bowed in greeting. The group of foundation-building cultivators didn't even look at these disciples. They slowly walked up to the high platform and released their divine senses, sweeping over these disciples again and again. This divine sense. Xiaohua quietly released his perception. He had already discovered that many of these divine senses were extremely similar to the divine senses he had sensed on the thunderclap peak that night. Sigh. Xiaohua sighed. Sure enough, those divine senses didn't seem to care about Xiaohua, and just swept past him. Damn it, looks like this young master has to pass the second round. Or even the third round. You guys. How can you have eyes but not recognize Jade? Xiaohua almost wanted to stomp his feet. Haha. Zhen's voice sounded. Senior brothers, I'm sure you all already have a plan in mind right at this moment. The hall door that had just been closed after the foundation-building cultivators entered opened again. A cultivator's figure appeared at the entrance of the Spring Thunder Hall. Who is this? Xiaohua lowered his head and sighed. He didn't anxiously look up at the high platform to watch him perform. Instead, he immediately noticed that there was someone there. However, when he saw that he couldn't see through that cultivator's cultivation level, he couldn't help but be stunned. Who is this? Everyone present also noticed and raised their heads to look. Everyone on the high platform tensed up. Zhen even hurriedly bowed in greeting. Martial Ant Sun Ming, disciple greets you. Martial Ant? Xiaohua came to a realization. This cultivator's cultivation level is probably at the gold core stage. That cultivator entered the hall. It was actually a middle-aged female cultivator. She didn't wear a Taoist robe, but rather pretty clothes. Greetings, Martial Ant Sun Ming. When Sun Ming arrived on the high platform, over 100 foundation-building cultivators all bowed in greeting. And you may dispense with the formalities. With a smile on his face, Sun Ming waved his hand and said, You can continue with your work. This penniless Taoist was just passing by and knew that today is a grand occasion for my Imperial Thunder sect, so I came down to take a look. Chapter 1533. Yes, Martial Uncle Sun, please take a seat. Zhen waved his hand, and a jade chair appeared on the high platform in front of everyone. Sun Ming nodded and sat down. After Sun Ming sat down, Zhen smiled and said, Even Martial Uncle Sun Ming was alarmed by my Imperial Thunder sect's grand event. It seems like today's apprenticeship ceremony will be very auspicious. Senior Martial brothers, please. We won't be polite. A red-faced middle-stage foundation establishment cultivator pointed at a disciple with a jade-like appearance and said, This child has a shallow thunder body, which is suitable for eyes hibernating thunder movement. I will take the lead. As he spoke, the disciple who was pointed out walked forward and bowed. Disciple Chang Haoyu greets master. Good, if I'm not wrong, he should be a disciple of Chang Mountain's Chang clan, right? Yes. Chang Haoyu said respectfully. Aristocratic families produce outstanding people, as expected. Let's go follow this old man to the Jade Archive Hall. The red-faced cultivator waved his hand and smiled at Zhen. Many thanks, Junior Martial Brother Zhen. Zhen smiled and returned the greeting. After the red-faced cultivator saluted Sun Ming again, he brought Chang Haoyu out of the Spring Thunder Hall. Immediately after, dozens of foundation establishment cultivators stood up and pointed out the selected disciples. Besides Xiaohua, Yuanbo, Mingge, and Wang Yunxiao were also among them. Seeing everyone being picked out, Xiaohua's heart gradually calmed down. There was a kind of transcendent feeling. All he lacked were cultivation methods and medicinal pills. In this Imperial Thunder sect, cultivation methods were needless to say. They definitely had them, but what about medicinal pills? He also had the space. When he had the chance, he would go to the Imperial Thunder sect's medicine garden. and find some spiritual herbs to transplant into the space. And it would be best if he could find a pill refining room. It would be best if he could still refine pills and have a master to guide him. If there weren't any, wasn't there still the technique imparting disciple? From the 2nd layer to the 10th layer of qi refining, he relied on himself. What was there to be afraid of? While Xiaohua was thinking, a beautiful middle-aged woman stood up, pointed at Shuai and said, "This poor Taoist has taken a fancy to this girl. Since she passed the disciple selection, this poor Taoist will take her as a disciple." Shuai's face was filled with surprise and joy. She walked out happily and glanced at Xiaohua. Her eyes curved and she immediately bowed towards the high platform. Xiaohua already knew that Shuai had a divine sense mark on her body, so he wasn't surprised. He only smiled. But just as Shuai was about to bow, a voice sounded, "Wait." Shuai was stunned. She bowed slightly in embarrassment, not knowing what to do. "Martial Uncle Sun?" The beautiful woman was somewhat puzzled. She turned her head and asked, "May I know what Martial Uncle wants?" "He, Martial Nephew. I have something to discuss with Martial Nephew." Sun Ming stood up and pointed at Shuai. She smiled and said, "This old one sees that this child's physique is very compatible with this old one's cultivation method. I want to take her as my disciple. I wonder if Martial Niece is willing to part with her?" Ah? Not only was Xiaohua stunned, even Shuai didn't dare to believe that this was true. Sun Ming was a gold core stage cultivator. For a qi refining stage cultivator, this was an opportunity that could only be encountered and not sought. In an instant, Shuai's heart jumped. Her eyes were filled with desire as she waited for the beautiful woman's answer. "Reporting to Martial Uncle, both sides are disciples of my Imperial Thunder sect. For this child to be able to receive Martial Uncle's guidance, her achievements will definitely be even higher. How can this disciple not help?" the beautiful woman said with a smile. "Good." Sun Ming clapped her hands and said, "This old one owes you a favor. If you have any matters, you can come find this old one." Disciple Shuai greets master. Shuai bowed towards Sun Ming. "And Shuai, stand up and follow master." Sun Ming nodded with a smile. Just as she was about to wave her hand to help Shuai up, a loud bang sounded. The Spring Thunder Hall's door was suddenly kicked open by someone. A thin cultivator with a somewhat wrinkled Taoist robe flew in from the outside. Before that cultivator even arrived, his voice had already arrived. "Zhen, why didn't you send a disciple to inform this old one? This old one already saw a disciple a few days ago. This time if I can't." Helplessness. Sun Ming frowned slightly and scolded with extreme displeasure. "I owe Martial Uncle." Sun Ming. That cultivator called helplessness was startled. He immediately landed on the ground of the Spring Thunder Hall and bowed respectfully. "Why are you interested in coming to this Spring Thunder Hall? Why can't this old one come?" Sun Ming sneered. "If this old one didn't come, how would I know that you actually dared to fly in this Spring Thunder Hall, where flying is prohibited? I'm afraid that this Spring Thunder Hall's door would also be destroyed by your kick, right?" "Good Martial Uncle." Sun Ming knows. Helplessness said with a wronged expression. "When this disciple heard that there was a disciple selection 2 days ago, I specially came back from the Myriad Thunder Valley and took some time to choose a suitable disciple from the Thunderclap Peak. After that, I hurriedly returned. You should know that the Myriad Thunder Valley is of great importance. This disciple didn't dare to slack off in the slightest and put all of my attention there. Therefore, not only is my cave residence near the Myriad Thunder Valley, but I also often slack off in the selection of disciples. Beside this disciple, there is no one else who is worthy of being called a good-for-nothing disciple. This time, if I still can't find a suitable disciple, I'm afraid that this disciple's lineage will." As he said that, helplessness scanned with his divine sense. His expression immediately changed and he said angrily, Zhen, where is my disciple?" Zhen was very helpless. He smiled apologetically and said, "Senior Martial Brother Helplessness, it's not that I didn't want to inform you. Isn't Senior Martial Brother already here for the selection of disciples? Junior Martial Brother can't be following behind Senior Martial Brother all the time and remind Senior Martial Brother every day, right?" As for which disciple you chose, this disciple also doesn't know. Furthermore, this disciple also doesn't know who took him away. I've already marked them with my divine sense. Who still dares to have ideas about my disciple? The more Helplessness spoke, the angrier he became. He directly roared. Martial nephew Helplessness. Sun Ming glared at him and said, You didn't even come. Who would recognize your divine sense mark? Moreover, you only came now. The other person has already been registered in the Jade Archive Hall. Even if you went to find the sect master. What reason do you have? But, this disciple has an important task for my Imperial Thunder sect. And doesn't have time to come and select disciples? Helplessness's face was bitter. He was just short of rolling his eyes. Xiaohua stood to the side and looked very ruefully at this Foundation establishment late-stage cultivator with messy hair and stubble on his face. This person was a disciple who truly contributed to the Imperial Thunder sect. Unexpectedly, because of an important task, he didn't come in time to select a disciple. Logically speaking, this kind of cultivator who was worthy of being the pillar of the Imperial Thunder sect should have some special authority. However, from what this cultivator said, it seemed that he only had one disciple. Then, how about this old woman give her disciple to you? Sun Ming said. Don't martial Aunt Sun Ming. You're a disciple of the Palace of Sun Thunder. And all your disciples are female cultivators. What would this disciple need a female disciple for? Helplessness heard this and quickly waved his hand. How about this, senior martial brother Helplessness? Zhen smiled apologetically and said, The first round of selecting disciples is about to end. Senior martial brother, let's see if there are any suitable candidates. Otherwise, how about the second round of selecting disciples and giving the best performance to senior martial brother as your disciple? Ah, the best performance? At the side, Xiaohua's heart was moved. This young master got 62 number plates. I'm afraid I got the most in this round of selection, right? Could it be that I have to take this cultivator as my master? Then, Xiaohua couldn't help but carefully size up Helplessness. Helplessness was a late-stage Foundation establishment cultivator, but his messy hair had a lot of gray. His face was thin, but there were wrinkles at the corners of his eyes and on his forehead. He looked like he was over 50 years old. Looking at his Taoist robe, it was also not very particular. Some places were actually a bit dirty. Then looking at the hands on his waist, they were a bit withered, the fingertips were black, and his two legs were slightly bent as he stood there. He looked very inferior to Xiao Yuehong, who used to be Shang Huaming. What? Helplessness said at this time. The good ones were all picked by that group of people. Who would want the remaining rotten cabbage? Back then, wasn't my good-for-nothing disciple. Alas, let's not talk about him. Forget it, forget it. As he spoke, he waved his hand again and prepared to leave. At this time, Sun Ming was unhappy. She scolded. Helplessness. Your Myriad Thunder Valley's lineage has a great responsibility, and has always had few disciples. From Master Lei to you, it's all the same. Today, with great difficulty, you finally have so many disciples to choose from. How can you throw away your responsibility? Martial Aunt Sun Ming, the matter of my Thunderclap Palace's Master Lei isn't something you can casually talk about. Helplessness stopped and turned around. Hee. How could I have the qualifications to talk about Master Lei? I'm just talking about Martial Uncle Lei's matter to you. Sun Ming smiled and waved her hand again. There are so many disciples, they won't be worse than your disciple. Pick one and take it back. Your trip out of Myriad Thunder Valley won't be in vain. Fine. He helplessly halted his steps and swept his divine sense across Xiaohua's body. Instead, his divine sense lingered on a young 9th-layer Qi refining cultivator for a long time. In the end, he withdrew his divine sense and said, This poor Taoist will wait for the second round. Okay, then I won't leave either. I'll stay and see if there's a disciple who's fated to be with you. Sun Ming smiled and sat down. Soon after, another dozen or so Foundation establishment cultivators stood up and took away the disciples they had chosen. Then, Zhen waved his hand, and the early Foundation establishment cultivator, who had been standing below the high platform, quickly stepped forward and handed over a jade slip. Zhen scanned it with his divine sense and frowned. He raised his eyes and looked below the high platform. His expression was very strange. What's wrong? Martial nephew Jen? Sun Ming asked curiously. Oh, nothing, nothing. Jen hurriedly said. I'm just a little curious. Hearing this, Sun Ming sat down. She was already very happy to have met Shueshue today. The disciple selection was Jen Lei Palace's business. Although she was their martial uncle, she couldn't interfere with other people's business for no reason. Senior martial brother helplessness. Jen turned his head and said with a bright smile, Junior martial brother will now point out the number 1 disciple in this selection to senior martial brother. I'm sure senior martial brother will be satisfied. Really? This time, it was helplessness's turn to be surprised. Xiaohua, 25 years old, late 10th layer qi refining. In this selection, he obtained 62 tokens and ranked first among 94 disciples. Jen pointed at Xiaohua and his voice sounded in the Spring Thunder Hall. Chapter 1534. Is that so? 25 years old? Late stage of the 10th layer? Hoo-hoo? After hearing Jen's words, he couldn't sit still any longer. He jumped out and looked around the stage. At this moment, the cultivators in the 11th layer had already been picked out. The remaining cultivators were either in the 10th or 9th layer, and they all looked very young. Besides, in the cultivation world, who would care about someone's age? Xiaohua was obviously in the 10th layer of the aura refining realm. He was obviously 18 years old and had a slightly childish face. Some knowledgeable cultivators could tell at a glance that he had taken youth-retaining herbs. On the contrary, they wouldn't pay attention to him. That's because an 18-year-old 10th layer of the aura refining realm cultivator was already an outstanding disciple of someone else's sect. How could he come to the Imperial Thunder sect to become a disciple? Helplessness's gaze fell on Xiaohua, a disciple of similar age and cultivation level. Xiaohua was actually not slow. When he heard Jen call him, he immediately wanted to step forward. However, helplessness's movements were even faster. Before Xiaohua could take a step, helplessness had already jumped out. Disciple Xiaohua greets senior. Xiaohua stepped forward and bowed in respect. Helplessness looked at Xiaohua with flickering eyes and asked, Are you sure you're 25 years old? Xiaohua was dumbfounded. Just now, when he told the Foundation Establishment cultivator that he was 23 years old, that was counting the 3 years he spent in Yellow Flower Ridge, and the 2 years he spent in secluded cultivation. He actually completely forgot about the 2 years he spent wandering about. No wonder the other cultivator said that he was a liar. Yes, disciple is indeed 25 years old. Xiaohua respectfully replied. Your face is so young. You must have taken youth-retaining herbs, right? Helplessness's face showed a trace of disgust. Oh, no wonder this cultivator scanned me several times with his divine sense, but didn't pay attention to me. Xiaohua understood. He then smiled apologetically and said, Disciple didn't know. When I was 18 years old, I became like this. I haven't changed at all. Oh, helplessness's face clearly showed a trace of a smile. He nodded and said, That's good. I really hate those cultivator families' male disciples taking youth-retaining herbs. Female cultivators take them for beauty. What's the use of men being beautiful? Helpless martial nephew. On the high platform, Sun Ming frowned and said, This disciple is being unreasonable. Helplessly, his mood was greatly improved. After speaking to Sun Ming, he turned his head and asked, Which aristocratic family are you from? Without waiting for Xiaohua to speak, Jen, who was on the high platform, said in a clear voice, Senior brother helplessness, you've made a mistake this time. Xiaohua isn't from any cultivation sect. He's a rogue cultivator. A rogue cultivator? Hearing Jen's words, not only were they helpless, even the other cultivators present, including Sun Ming, were stunned. A rogue cultivator at the 10th layer of qi refining, and at the age of 25, this was really rare in the country of Xi's cultivation world. But then Sun Ming sighed. Sure enough, he sighed helplessly and shook his head. What a pity, Xiaohua. If you weren't a loose cultivator, I would have accepted you as my disciple. But, you are a loose cultivator, so this old man can only reluctantly part with you. Xiaohua was greatly surprised. He cupped his hands and said anxiously, Senior, I don't blame you for not accepting me as your disciple, but why can't I, a loose cultivator, take Senior as my master? Senior isn't a loose cultivator, so you don't know the hardships of being a loose cultivator. Ever since I was at the second layer of qi refining, I didn't have any cultivation methods or medicinal pills. I went through many difficulties to obtain some scattered cultivation methods. On one hand, I painstakingly cultivated, and on the other, I had to search for medicinal pills. Now, after spending endless effort, I finally reached the 10th layer of qi refining, and even passed the Imperial Thunder Sect's disciple selection. Senior, just because I'm a loose cultivator, you refuse to accept me. Isn't this too cruel for me? Alas, he sighed helplessly and said, although I'm not a loose cultivator, before I entered the Imperial Thunder Sect, I was a disciple of a small cultivation aristocratic family. How could I not know the hardships of loose cultivators like you? Moreover, my previous disciple was also similar to a loose cultivator. If you say that I treat loose cultivators differently, then you're being unfair to me. Seeing the anger on Xiaohua's face, helplessness felt as if he was looking at his former self. He sighed again and said, Didn't you say it just now? Ever since you were at the second layer of qi refining, you didn't have a complete cultivation method. All of your cultivation methods were incomplete. Then let me ask you, how many cultivation methods did you change after you reached the 10th layer of qi refining? 3. Xiaohua answered honestly. Then what about you? Helplessness suddenly asked a nearby 10th layer qi refining cultivator. Reporting to Senior, of course it's 1. That cultivator said very proudly. Junior's clan has a complete set of qi refining cultivation methods, from the first layer of qi refining to the 12th layer of qi refining. Xiaohua, do you understand? Helplessness didn't explain and asked Xiaohua somewhat pitifully. Alas, disciple understands. Xiaohua's face was also bleak, and his tone was filled with boundless loneliness. Different cultivation methods have different methods of tempering the meridians, and the degree of tempering is also different. Using different cultivation methods to temper the meridians to the high level of qi refining, there definitely isn't a single cultivation method that tempers the meridians thoroughly from beginning to end, tempering them completely. If the meridians are like that, true qi is also like that. True qi tempered by different cultivation methods will always be impure in the end, and it's really disadvantageous for breaking through to foundation building. Excellent. On the high platform, Sun Ming also clapped her hands. What Xiaohua said is extremely true. I didn't think that a young loose cultivator would actually have this kind of knowledge. If he wasn't already at the 10th layer of qi refining, Martial Nephew Helplessness would have definitely accepted him as a disciple. That's right, destiny makes fools of people. Xiaohua, if you were at the second layer of qi refining right now, if you were only 14 or 15 years old, but based on your comprehension ability, I would have accepted you as a disciple no matter what. Helplessness nodded. If the meridians in true qi are like that, then the realm and cultivation are even more so. What one needs to cultivate, and what one needs to sharpen in one layer of a cultivation method is all fixed. And what one can't do in one layer of a cultivation method, in the next layer one definitely has to do. There won't be anything left out. So much so that between each layer of a realm, there will be a bottleneck. This bottleneck is the absolute opportunity to sharpen one's cultivation in the current layer. If you don't break through the bottleneck and achieve the cultivation you need to achieve in this layer, then this cultivation method won't let you enter the next layer. Xiaohua, from the second layer of qi refining to the 10th layer of qi refining, do you rarely encounter bottlenecks? Yes, disciple rarely encounters bottlenecks. Xiaohua nodded. Exactly. Because you're cultivating multiple cultivation techniques, there are flaws in every realm. Your foundation isn't solid, so your cultivation techniques shouldn't be able to advance. However, with your top-notch aptitude, these flaws are covered up. That's why you can't sense the bottleneck, and the bottleneck will appear when you break through to the foundation establishment realm. Disciple understands. Although helplessness didn't finish speaking, Xiaohua already understood. Perhaps the bottleneck of the first 12 layers of qi refining would appear at the end, forming an insurmountable peak. Foundation building was the most difficult threshold in his life. So, Xiaohua, don't blame me, helplessness said apologetically. However, without waiting for helplessness to finish speaking, Zhen laughed from the high platform. Senior brother helplessness, please wait for a moment. I still have some things I haven't read out. Helplessness rolled his eyes and said, even if you say a deluge of heavenly flowers, I only have one disciple with no future. I don't want to take in any more burdens. Zhen ignored him and read. Xiaohua, concealed fire physique, the fire attribute is unyielding and tyrannical. In the disciple's first test, the fire attribute in his body caused the spirit of the mirror to swell and burst. Ah? Concealed fire physique? How is this possible? Helplessness was stupefied. His eyes emitted an incomparably pleasant surprise, and he almost trembled a bit. Which disciple tested this? Are you serious? Haha, I'll let junior brother know. Xiaohua destroyed the spirit of the mirror, and it was my Zhenlei Palace's martial uncle Zhenqing, who personally verified it. This record was also personally written by martial uncle Zhenqing. Ha, good. Helplessness heard this and raised his head to laugh loudly. I was wondering how a loose cultivator could rely on 3 unorthodox techniques to cultivate to the 10th layer of qi refining at the age of 25. It turns out that he has the rare concealed fire physique. Moreover, the fire attribute is unyielding and tyrannical. With the help of this concealed fire physique, any bottleneck is nothing difficult. Then this disciple Xiaohua, do you want it? If you don't accept him, I'm afraid the other senior brothers will make a move? Zhen asked with a smile. Haha, isn't this nonsense? I have always worked hard for the Imperial Thunder Sect. I just picked a disciple, but he was snatched away by someone else. The heavens have opened their eyes this time, and made this group of old things blind. This concealed fire physique, TSK, they actually made a mistake and let I take advantage of it. How can I not want a disciple given by the heavens? Disciple greets master. Xiaohua was overjoyed when he heard this and stepped forward to bow and salute. Good disciple. Helplessly he helped Xiaohua up and said, you will follow master to register in the Jade Archive Hall. In the future, you can cultivate well and make my myriad Thunder Valley proud. Yes, disciple will definitely, Xiaohua said with a smile. Good helplessness. Since you have accepted a disciple that you are proud of, this old woman should also leave. You and I can go to the Jade Archive Hall together. Sun Ming stood up and said. On the other side, Shui was also happy and looked at Xiaohua with eyes full of affection. Martial uncle, please. Helplessly taking a step back, he bowed and said. However, at this time Xiaohua, who was full of joy, also bowed. Just as he bowed, he suddenly felt a faint kacha sound coming from inside his meridians. A medicinal liquid that was several times more spiritual fire than the fire essence flame crystal, but much less pure, suddenly appeared in his meridians. In a flash, his entire meridians expanded. Not good, the restriction of the clear flower pill has been broken. Xiaohua suddenly woke up and his soul immediately flew out of his body. He no longer cared about etiquette and raised his hand to pull helplessness in front of him and shouted, Master, save me. What? Helplessness was very displeased, but when he turned around and saw Xiaohua's face was completely red, he was also greatly shocked. He immediately understood with a sweep of his divine sense and didn't have time to ask. His hands formed seals and seals and seals entered Xiaohua's body. Chapter 1535. What kind of cultivation base is Wuxian at? Wuxian is a late-stage foundation establishment cultivator. With a few hand seals, the bright flower pills in Xiaohua's meridians immediately shackled. Why do you have Wuxian? Was shocked and asked as soon as the restriction took effect. Xiaohua interrupted Wuxian's question and said, Disciple has something to report. Master, please find a quiet place. Many of the Spring Thunder Hall's disciples and cultivators on the platform had already left, but half of them were still there. How could Xiaohua let others know? Although these cultivators were all disciples of the Imperial Thunder sect, Wuxian's face was full of suspicion. He turned to look at Sun Ming, who was also puzzled, and said, "Martial Aunt Sun Ming, please wait in the hall for a moment. Disciple has something to ask Xiaohua." "And no problem. Go ahead, I'll wait for you outside the hall." Sun Ming nodded with a smile, but Shueshue looked at Xiaohua with worry. "Come with me." With a wave of his hand, helplessness brought Xiaohua to a side chamber of the Spring Thunder Hall. After the time it took to smoke a cigarette, helplessness brought Xiaohua out of the side chamber. At this moment, helplessness's face was filled with shock, ecstasy, suspicion, and confusion. As he walked, he pondered. When they arrived outside the hall, Sun Ming was still standing there waiting. Next to her were several cultivators who had chosen their disciples. Presumably, they were going to the Jade Archive Hall together. Wuxian smiled bitterly and bowed. "Martial Aunt Sun, disciple, has some urgent matters. For the time being, disciple can't go to the Jade Archive Hall with Martial Aunt and the other junior brothers." "And what matters? Xiaohua, is there anything suspicious?" Sun Ming stared at Xiaohua and asked. "This, I can't tell Martial Aunt Sun for the time being. Disciple will talk about it after disciple goes to the Heavenly Thunder Palace to see the sect master." Wu Xian's words contained a trace of excitement. Xiaohua, who was at the side, was slightly unhappy. Earlier, he'd warned repeatedly for a long time not to reveal anything. Who knew if there were any spies from the Shanghua sect in the Imperial Thunder sect? However, if he directly said that he wanted to go to the Heavenly Thunder Palace, then he would definitely say that the head of the 8 Great Thunder Palaces, that is, the sect master of the Imperial Thunder sect, was there. How could helplessness not cause others to be surprised when he said that? Sure enough, Sun Ming was shocked. The several cultivators beside her were also shocked. Shueshue and the other disciples also had puzzled looks on their faces. Shueshue was even somewhat anxious. Xiaohua shook his head slightly to signal her to be at ease, but the concern in Shueshue's eyes didn't lessen at all. Helplessness naturally had its own reasons. When Sun Ming and the others heard that it was the Heavenly Thunder Hall, they did not ask any further questions. Although they had looks of shock on their faces, they still smiled and said, "Then you had better hurry and go. For such an important matter, if you do not have the sect master's approval, you must not reveal it to us." "Many thanks, Martial Uncle Sun Ming." Helplessly he bowed in greeting. With a wave of his hand he pulled Xiaohua to his side. However, a light thunderclap could be heard in midair. Helplessly he executed the lightning escape and flew far away. "Hee Martial nephews, let's go to the Jade Archive Hall." Sun Ming glanced at Helplessness, who was running away in a hurry, and led everyone to the Jade Archive Hall. Shueshue walked at the back, looking at the sky with worry. Although the lightning escape was fast, the Leiemo mountain range was indeed very big. From the Zhenlei Palace to the Heavenly Thunder Palace, it took them almost the time to eat a meal. "Damn it, this is really too big, isn't it?" Xiaohua followed Helplessness and flew. He did not reveal a single trace of transcendence energy. Seeing that Helplessness was flying several times faster than him, he could not help but be shocked by the strength of the Imperial Thunder sect. However, he was immediately dumbfounded. This is the Imperial Thunder sect that is second only to the 3 great sects of Xiuzhen. It is on the same level as the Huanhua sect. How could their sect be small? Take Shanghuaming as an example. If the entire Yellow Flower Ridge was taken out, it might not be smaller than the Imperial Thunder sect. Looking at the enormous mountain peak, Xiaohua realized that there was actually a palace that was even more majestic than the Zhenlei Palace. It had a grandeur that was even more dazzling than the Zhenlei Palace. Xiaohua knew that this was most likely the Zhenlei Palace. Sure enough, he heard Helplessness say in a low voice, "Xiaohua, this is the Thunder Immortal Peak where the sect leader of the Imperial Thunder sect, Qianlei, resides. The Heavenly Thunder Palace is just ahead." As he said that, he helplessly pointed at the group of palaces, before continuing, "When we reach the Great Thunder Hall, you must clearly tell the sect master everything that you have said to this old man earlier. Senior Martial Brother Qianqing Hua is a disciple of the Heavenly Thunder Palace and is from the sect leader's branch. He is also my junior martial brother. I did not expect such a thing to happen. Alas, you have contributed so much to my Imperial Thunder sect. I'm afraid you will be taken into the Heavenly Thunder Palace by the sect leader. This is also the reason why I did not bring you to the Jade Archive Hall. Hee master, I called you master just now. How can I go back on my words now? Xiaohua said with a smile. You are thinking too much. A hint of joy flashed through Helplessness's eyes, but he immediately shook his head. My myriad Thunder Valley has always had a hard time. Their cultivation is not particularly outstanding, and the disciples they teach are also mediocre. Your hidden fire physique is buried in my myriad Thunder Valley. Alright, let's not talk about this. It won't be too late to talk about it when we reach the Great Thunder Palace. Helplessness waved his hand slightly and landed in front of a palace. This palace was different from the Spring Thunder Palace of the Imperial Thunder Palace. In front of the door was a peak chi refining disciple of the Imperial Thunder sect guarding. Seeing Helplessness approach, he walked forward and cupped his hands. Martial Uncle, which palace have you come to? The Great Thunder Palace. Please report your name. I am Helplessness of the Shocking Thunder Palace's Myriad Thunder Valley. Today I have brought Xiaohua to see the sect leader. I have an extremely urgent matter to report. Helplessness returned the salute and said, Alright, Martial Uncle knows that the sect leader is not in the Great Thunder Palace right now. Only Martial Ancestor Miyu of the Canlei Palace is on guard. How about this disciple report to Martial Ancestor now? That disciple said with a smile. This is the only way. Helplessness wrinkled his brows and slapped his hand, taking out a waste tablet from his storage pouch and handing it over. This is my waste tablet. I would like to trouble Martial Nephew to report to Martial Ancestor. That disciple took Helplessness's waste tablet and went in. However, after a short while, he returned and said helplessly, Martial Ancestor Miyu invites Martial Uncle to speak in the palace. Alright, Helplessness took the waste tablet and didn't say anything else. He waved his hand and was about to bring Xiaohua in. Martial Uncle, that disciple, extended his hand, stopping Xiaohua as he said very discontentedly, Martial Uncle, don't forget, aura refining disciples are not allowed to enter Colossal Thunder Hall unless they are summoned by the palace lord on duty. Sigh, Helplessness slapped his forehead and said very regretfully, Look at me. I should have explained it just now. How about this, Martial Nephew? Please report to Martial Ancestor again. This is the new disciple who passed the selection this time. Xiaohua. Helplessness had no choice but to say it again. Helplessness. Why did you come to the Great Thunder Palace instead of guarding the Myriad Thunder Valley? Just as Helplessness was explaining, a melodious voice came from midair. This voice is somewhat familiar. Xiaohua didn't think he knew any senior from the Imperial Thunder sect. However, when he really looked up, he couldn't help but stare blankly. He saw a cultivator flying in midair. That cultivator looked very young and had an ordinary appearance. However, his complexion was somewhat red, and the only thing that was somewhat confusing was his sparse eyebrows. Wasn't this the mysterious cultivator Xiaohua met in front of the Thunder Accumulation Cave, whose cultivation was unknown? That cultivator descended from midair. Helplessness hurriedly went forward and saluted, saying, Helplessness greets Martial Ancestor Lei Meng. Martial Ancestor Lei Meng? Thunder Meng Taoist? Hearing this, Xiaohua immediately remembered what Sun Ming said in the Spring Thunder Palace. Get up. What are you doing here? Thunder Meng Taoist waved his hand and helped Helplessness up. He casually glanced at Xiaohua and turned his head to ask Helplessness. However, just as he finished speaking, Thunder Meng Taoist seemed to remember something and turned his head to ask Xiaohua. You seem to be that loose cultivator from the Thunder Accumulation Cave, called Xiaohua, right? Hearing this, Xiaohua's heart was filled with joy. He didn't expect that a nascent soul senior would actually remember him. A small loose cultivator at the second level of chi refining. He immediately stepped forward and saluted. Disciple Xiaohua greets Martial Ancestor. Martial Ancestor? Thunder Meng Daoist was slightly stunned. Helplessness, who was beside him, felt that his brain wasn't enough. He muttered, "Martial ancestor, you know Xiaohua? He's a disciple who passed this time's selection, and was accepted by me as a disciple." You passed the disciple selection? Thunder Meng Daoist was stunned. Looking at Xiaohua's cultivation, he was even more shocked. "Xiaohua, it's only been 3 years. You actually went from the 2nd level of qi refining to the 10th level of qi refining? This is bad." Xiaohua complained in his heart. Although this person was already his master, but going from the 2nd level of qi refining to the 10th level of qi refining, this kind of unimaginable cultivation was something that could only happen in a dream. How could he dare to let this kind of thing happen to him? Xiaohua promptly saluted and said, "Yes, martial ancestor knows." That day, Junior was a bit secretive from martial ancestor. At that time, disciple's cultivation was damaged. Although my cultivation was at the 9th level of qi refining, I could only use the magic power of the 3rd level of qi refining. I'm afraid that martial ancestor misunderstood. "Oh, so it's like this. I was wondering why I felt that your magic power was much higher than others of the same level. So it's like this." Thunder Meng Daoist nodded. In the eyes of a nascent soul cultivator like him, qi refining cultivators were like infants. How could an adult accurately distinguish the strength of an infant? Hee, then you're also not a loose cultivator, right? Thunder Meng Daoist didn't care about Xiaohua's concealment and laughed. Disciple is indeed a loose cultivator. That day in the Thunder Accumulation Cave, I really wanted to join Tianqi and do some things. Xiaohua almost wiped the cold sweat from his forehead. That day, martial ancestor evaluated disciple's cultivation. Disciple didn't know how to explain, so no matter. That day, you and I didn't know each other. I only saw that your cultivation was not bad, so I casually evaluated you. You can't take it seriously. However, I didn't expect that today you would actually enter my Imperial Thunder sect, and even become a disciple of my thunderous palace. You and this old man do have some fate, Thunder Meng Daoist said with a smile, still looking like the senior, who helped Xiaohua that day in the Thunder Accumulation Cave. Martial ancestor. Yes, martial ancestor knows. This time, Xiaohua has come to the Great Thunder Hall to report to the sect master. At the side, seeing the two people actually starting to reminisce about old times. At the same time he was happy in his heart, he was also somewhat anxious. Chapter 1536. Oh, that's right. Xiaohua, what business do you have with Wu Hen? Thunder Meng Daoist nodded. Grandmaster, please lay down the silence talisman. Xiaohua bowed and said. Oh, Thunder Meng Daoist waved his hand and laid down a silence talisman restriction. He smiled and said, You're quite cautious, just like you were at the Thunder Accumulation Cave. However, when Xiaohua said the 3 words Qianqing Hua, Thunder Meng Daoist's expression changed greatly. He waved his hand and said, Xiaohua, who did you tell about this matter? Yes, Grandmaster knows. Disciple has only told Master. I didn't reveal a single word to anyone else. Xiaohua said respectfully. Good. Thunder Meng Daoist said good 3 times in a row. He waved his hand and the silence talisman restriction instantly shattered. You don't need to repeat such an important matter a second time. You should personally report to Sect Master. Sect Master is temporarily not in the Great Thunder Hall. Xiaohua said helplessly. That's easy. Thunder Meng Daoist waved his hand and used the thunder light sound transmission technique. A bolt of lightning rapidly flew towards a place on the Thunder Immortal Peak. Thunder Meng Daoist looked at Xiaohua. The more he looked at him, the more he liked him. He said very amiably. Yes, I'll listen to Grandmaster's instructions. Xiaohua already had a good impression of Thunder Meng Daoist. Now that he had become his grand disciple, he was satisfied and replied respectfully. The person at the side looked on helplessly and rejoiced in his heart. He thought to himself, from the looks of it, it seems that Grandmaster has a very good impression of this Xiaohua. Fortunately, I accepted Xiaohua as my disciple earlier, Otherwise, wouldn't Xiaohua have become my martial uncle? Rumble, rumble, rumble. Several figures flew out from somewhere on the Thunder Immortal Peak. Like rolling thunder, they quickly rushed to the front of the Great Thunder Hall. When they appeared, they were Master Qianlazi, Fairy Xianhua, and the others. Master Qianlazi's face was full of joy. He had already spread out his divine sense from far away, and firmly locked onto the unfamiliar Xiaohua. When they came close, Master Qianlazi's eyes that contained thunder light swept over Xiaohua, full of pressure. My goodness, this is a master who is even more powerful than Lei Mengzhenren. Xiaohua's heart trembled, and he hurriedly bowed in greeting, but he was still too late. Lei Meng Daoist and Wu Hen had already bowed, and Wu Hen respectfully said, "Myriad Thunder Valleys, Wu Hen greets Sovereign." Fortunately, Xiaohua's disciple Xiaohua greets Sovereign was heard clearly by Qianlazi. Disciple? Qianlazi was a bit surprised, but then he laughed. Ha ha ha, Qian Qinghua is smart for once. Then he turned to instruct the disciples of Great Thunder Hall. Go call Palace Master Zhen Sheng of Great Thunder Hall over. This guy has also made a great contribution. The disciple nodded and immediately sent a message. Qianlazi waved his hand and said, "Let's go, Xiaohua. We'll talk inside." Yes, disciple obeys. Xiaohua bowed respectfully and hid behind Wu Hai. Qianlazi and the others naturally went in first, while Helpless and Xiaohua walked at the back. Don't be fooled by Helpless' arrogance in the Spring Thunder Hall. Here, he was extremely respectful, even more careful than Xiaohua. The style of the Great Thunder Palace was not much different from the Spring Thunder Palace, except that the interior of the palace was much larger. Two incomparably huge pillars supported the roof of the palace. Lightning was lingering on the pillars, and countless strange patterns were emerging one after another. The surrounding jade walls and the roof of the palace were also filled with purple talismans that were faintly swimming about, displaying their endless means. Great Thunder Hall didn't have a high platform, but there were 8 praying mats floating in the air. Qianlazi and the other palace masters sat on their own praying mats. Qianlazi waved his hand, and a light purple thunderbolt gathered on the pillar in the center of the hall. The pillar emitted a tricolored brilliance, and the brilliance went straight up the pillar. After rushing to the roof of the hall, it quickly spread in all directions, and in the blink of an eye, covered the entire hall. Xiaohua, tell me about your encounter with Qinghua. Qianlazi was very calm, and after seeing that the restriction of the Great Thunder Hall had taken effect, he slowly asked. Yes, disciple Xiaohua took a step forward. Although there was some fear in his heart, he suppressed his excitement and prepared to report. Sectmaster, why don't we wait for Zhen Sheng and Dui Jie to come first? This child deliberately wanted to contribute to the sect, and thought of the method of recruiting disciples, but he was scolded by you. If he didn't hear it with his own ears, how could he be at ease? Fairy Xianhua said with a light smile. When did I scold them? Qianlazi's mood was very good, and he said with a smile. That day, I even encouraged him to recruit a few more disciples. Xiaohua, what did Qian Qinghua ask you to bring back? Seeing that Qianlazi didn't ask, Thunder Talisman's spiritual master didn't ask. Xiaohua would be his direct disciple in the future, so there was no need to be polite. Qianlazi wasn't in a hurry. Hearing Thunder Talisman's spiritual master's question, his ears perked up and his eyes contained a trace of expectation as he looked at Xiaohua. Seeing the 6 nascent soul cultivators looking at him with 12 pairs of eyes. Although there was no pressure, cold sweat gradually dripped down from Xiaohua's forehead. Damn, this nascent soul cultivator is really powerful. Just his gaze alone can kill me. A chi condensation cultivator. Xiaohua secretly sighed. He patted his hand and took out the bead from his storage bag. When the bead was taken out from the storage pouch, countless tiny purple lightning bolts immediately flashed. The lightning bolts lingered around the bead and gradually grew larger. Rumble, rumble, rumble. In the time it took for a spark to fly off a flint, the 4 walls of the enormous Thunder Palace, the roof of the palace and the 2 giant pillars simultaneously flickered in sync with the lightning bolts surrounding the bead. With a flash, the lightning gathered around the bead, and was absorbed by the bead at a speed visible to the naked eye. This wasn't the end. Immediately after, the second wave of lightning appeared, and was also absorbed by the bead. Ah! Thunder-devouring bead. Seeing this, Qian Leizi and the others revealed extremely shocked expressions. Xiaohua only heard their voices. His eyes blurred and his hand became lighter. The thunder-devouring bead in his hand disappeared. Xiaohua wasn't surprised. He secretly touched the cold sweat on his forehead and looked at Qian Leizi, who was floating in the air with the thunder-devouring bead in his hand. At this moment, Qian Leizi's face was filled with shock, surprise, and shock. At this moment, the thunder-devouring bead that was flickering with purple lightning was blocked by an invisible barrier, and the lightning couldn't escape from Master Qian Lei's palm in the slightest. At this moment, the barrier around the Great Thunder Palace had returned to its previous state, and one couldn't see any difference. Lei Tan Daoist and the others were like Qian Leizi. They could no longer sit still. Their bodies floated up and surrounded Qian Leizi. Their eyes were fixed on the lightning-devouring bead. The lightning-devouring bead was reflected in their eyes. After a while, Master Qian Lei waved his hand, and another thunderbolt hit the pillar. The same tricolored light flashed, and Xiaohua was a bit confused. At this moment, Qian Leizi lowered his head and said, "Xiaohua, I have some difficulties. There's something I need to tell you." Xiaohua was stunned. He bowed and said, "Sect Master, please tell me what you need. This thing is indeed brought back by Senior Uncle Qian Qinghua. There's nothing else." "Haha, good boy, I'm not talking about this." Qian Leizi smiled and said, "Qinghua hasn't returned to the thunder-controlling sect, and his spirit tablet hasn't been damaged. As far as I know, he has probably used the soul-concealing technique, which is a secret technique of our sect, to hide all of his life force and aura. I'm sure you know that the Shanghua sect, Xuanyan school, and Seven Skills sect are still looking for him." Hearing this, Xiaohua understood. Without any hesitation, he said with a smile, "Sect Master, please don't worry. Since I've already come to the Imperial Thunder sect, I've already offended the 3 sections. Besides, I'm now a disciple of the Imperial Thunder sect. Why should I be afraid of them? Even if they have some dirty tricks up their sleeves, how can I not trust Sect Master? Good, good, good." Qian Leizi shouted 3 times in a row, then clapped his hands. Instantly, the restrictive spells around the thunder-devouring bead were broken, and the lightning bolts hovering around the thunder-devouring bead were enlarged once again. At the same time, because the restrictive spells of the huge Thunder Palace were no longer isolated, countless dark clouds suddenly appeared in the sky above the Thunder Immortal Peak and the Thunder Mo mountain range. Strands of lightning bolts were flashing in the dark clouds, like swimming pythons, which were accumulating power to strike down at the huge Thunder Palace. Moreover, it was unknown just how many restrictions within the Thunder Core mountain range were also beginning to shine with brilliance following the appearance of the dark clouds. Numerous runes gradually flickered, gradually converging into threads of lightning, just like the restrictions of the colossal Thunder Palace, eagerly about to be thrown into the extremely distant thunder-devouring orb. Alas, I was lucky. Qian Leizi let out a long sigh. He waved his hand and an extremely powerful seal surrounded the thunder-devouring bead. As the lightning from the thunder-devouring bead retracted, the seal around the Thunder Mo mountain range returned to normal. The dark clouds above the mountain range also gradually disappeared. At the foot of the Thunder Mo mountain range, many disciples of the Splendid sect, Xuanyan school, and Qiqiao sect didn't relax their vigilance just because the Imperial Thunder sect's disciple selection was over. Less than 100 li away from the Thunder Mo mountain range, several late-stage Foundation establishment cultivators were sitting cross-legged at the foot of a tall mountain. 2 of them were the male and female cultivators from the Splendid sect that Xiaohua met in Shihuang town. Similarly, the male cultivator looked at the peaceful scene and raised his voice. "Junior Martial Sister Qi, is there any news from the Sky Thunder Peak?" Senior Martial Brother Gao, in the past few days, only those who didn't pass the Imperial Thunder sect's test went down the mountain. What news could there be? They didn't even stop Xiaohua from going up the mountain. If that Xiaohua really went up the mountain, how could he be so stupid as to go down the mountain again? Junior Martial Sister Qi's complexion wasn't good. Needless to say, Junior Marshal Sister Qi and Senior Marshal Brother Gao did stop Xiaohua in Shihuang Town that day. However, they didn't find any trace of the thunder-devouring bead on Xiaohua's body, so they easily let him go. Later, things changed, especially when Xiaohua strangely escaped from the hands of the Three-Sex Foundation establishment cultivators. This made the splendid sect realize that Xiaohua was different. Senior Marshal Brother Gao and Junior Marshal Sister Qi didn't dare to hide the matter, and reported it to the splendid sect's master. When he heard that Xiaohua was stopped by his own disciples, the splendid sect's master almost flew into a rage. Therefore, these two unlucky late-stage Foundation establishment cultivators were naturally sent to the foot of the mountain to atone for their crimes. That you're tuning in to the Li Mei's Wuxia Whispers YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.